South Wales. A school is in lockdown following reports of a school stabbing. 3 people have been injured and 1 has been arrested. We'll have all the latest. Elsewhere, 3 people have been arrested after 5 migrants died in the latest Channel tragedy yesterday. And now it's emerged that French police stood by and simply allowed a dinghy crammed with a record 112 people to set sail for England. And then the Navy gave it an escort. The big question today is it time to pull the plug on the hundreds of millions of pounds we pay the French every year? Next up, after weeks of the Metropolitan Police being accused of soft-soaping pro-Palestine protests, yesterday riot police and mounted cops steamed into a St George's Day parade, and then they closed all the pubs in the area. I know because I was here. Is this final proof of 2-tiered policing in Britain? And believe me, you will not want to miss this fantastic story. We'll meet the man who served in the Special Forces during the Second World War. He's been celebrating his 102nd birthday in style. Look at him, he looks younger than me. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. So yesterday we saw scenes of the St George's Day rally and the police tooled up. They got on their horses, they got their riot shields out, they got their batons out in a way we would simply never ever see on a pro-Palestine march. And by the way, there's yet another one of those happening in about 2 hours' time right outside here. Then they close all the pubs and I'll be asking the question, is this now turning into a class war on the white working classes? I'll be joined by a barrister who thinks precisely that. Get in touch with your views. Do you think yesterday was a new low in policing? Send your views, post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, it's your headlines and it's Sophia Wensler.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom at 3 o'clock. Your headlines. 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl, in the English Channel yesterday. The National Crime Agency says they were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. Those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. It comes as figures from the Home Office show more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. 3 people have been injured in a reported stabbing at a secondary school. Police say 1 person has been arrested after the incident at Ammon Valley School. It's now in lockdown amid reports that a teacher is one of those who've been injured. Parents are reporting a large police presence in the area with 2 helicopters at the scene. The Prime Minister expressed shock at the news and the Home Secretary says he's being kept informed. To other news now, the Deputy Prime Minister took aim at Labour for failing to back the government's increased spending on defence. Standing in for Rishi Sunak, who's in Germany, Oliver Dowden began today's PMQs with a joke aimed at the Labour deputy's tax affairs, suggesting she might claim the House of Commons as her main residence. On the matter of defence, however, Mr Dowden said Labour had been silent on whether it backs investment in the armed forces.
In an increasingly dangerous world, the Prime Minister was able to announce his plan for the biggest strengthening of defence spending in a generation. But it should come as no surprise that the party opposite refused to say whether they back it or not, because this comes from the Right Honourable Lady who voted to scrap Trident and install in Downing Street someone who wanted to change the army into a Peace Corps. There you have it.
Angela Rayner hit back, though, saying that Mr Dowden had been obsessing over her living arrangements while the government quietly cuts funds for the army.
The difference is that we haven't cut the army to its smallest size since Napoleon. And Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says Britain will continue offering what he called unwavering support for Ukraine as he appeared next to his German counterpart in Berlin this afternoon.
As a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognising the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defence spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defence spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies and the two largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends, as you said, for as long as it takes.
Meanwhile, in the US, the Senate voted overwhelmingly to pass a long-awaited aid package for Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan. It's expected to be quickly signed by President Biden, ending months of uncertainty over whether the United States would continue supporting Kyiv. It comes after the bill passed the House of Representatives on Saturday in a show of bipartisan support, despite considerable resistance among some Republicans. Ukraine's President Zelensky says it reinforces the US as a beacon of democracy. The former leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, has been released on bail. Northern Ireland's longest-serving MP was suspended from the DUP following his arrest last month for what's being described as historical sex charges, including one count of rape. His wife has also been charged with aiding and abetting in relation to the same investigation. In his resignation letter, he said he would be strenuously contesting the allegations. Several military horses on the loose in central London this morning have now been contained. Video posted to social media appeared to show one of the animals covered in blood. At least 4 people were injured as the animals galloped their way through the busy city streets. Westminster Police say they'll now be transported by car. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Sophia. Now we start with this afternoon's breaking news, and 3 people have been injured in a reported stabbing incident at a school in Carmarthenshire in southwest Wales. 1 person has been arrested, and I'm joined now by our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, I believe you have an update for us on this story.
Just a word now that's come out from the school, Ammon Valley School in Ammanford, saying that you will be aware of the incident that has taken place at the school today. The family members of all the injured persons have been informed, it says. We would look to reassure parents and the public that the incident is contained. So that's significant in that, of course, there are lots of worried parents. They were in the hundreds. I think they've reduced a bit now, who were outside the school gates for some time, very concerned that their loved ones might have been caught up in this incident. But the school confirming to those parents that anyone who was directly caught up in this, their family members have been informed. So if they haven't been informed, the inference, of course, is that your loved ones are safe. But a worrying time, of course, for those parents and also for relatives and friends of members of staff, as the reports that we're getting is that 2 members of staff may have been injured and a 3rd person injured. We're told that 1 person has been arrested and is in police custody at this time. Dyfed-Powys police say that they are not looking for anyone else in connection with this incident. We heard from one of the school governors as well, who was, as well as confirming those reports that she had heard about 2 members of staff being injured, also saying that the school has rehearsed quite frequently lockdown procedures, a sad reflection, of course, of the times we live in. We are more than aware of lockdown procedures in the likes of the US, where they have a very significant gun crime problem and mass school shootings. But clearly, even here in the UK, schools now alive to the potential threat out there and rehearse those lockdown procedures. Well, Martin, we're told that the pupils are still being held in their classrooms at the moment. Now, the reason we understand that this is happening is because investigators are now going from classroom to classroom and speaking to those pupils. So it may be some time before those pupils are released and able to rejoin their families again. But a very significant and worrying incident that unfolded at this secondary school in Ammanford with, we're told, 2 air ambulances that responded to the scene, along with multiple paramedic vehicles and other police resources. That has now all been contained. The injured have been removed from the scene and 1 person is in custody.
Mark White, a harrowing story. Welsh First Minister Vaughan Gething has said this is a deeply worrying incident, and Andrew Davies, leader of the Welsh Conservatives, calls it extremely concerning. Mark White, thank you very much for that full update with all the latest there from that Wales school stabbing. We'll, of course, have regular updates on that very worrying incident throughout the show. But next to the news that 3 men have been arrested after 5 Channel migrants, including a child, died yesterday. The National Crime Agency has confirmed the men were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. And the men were 2 Sudanese nationals, aged 22 and 19, and a South Sudan national who is 22. Well, yesterday's tragedy came at a time when there is increasing violence among migrants and people smugglers in northern France. And the UK is committed to giving France more than £670 million between 2018 and 2026 in a bid to tackle the migrant crisis. But 402 people crossed the Channel yesterday alone. Well, I'm joined now by Peter Allen, who's a journalist based in Paris. Peter, welcome to the show. Incredibly concerning scenes yesterday and reports emerging that 50 people were on the dinghy, an extra 62 then rampaged onto the craft, causing it to partially capsize. But the most concerning report we're hearing, Peter, is that the French police simply stood by and did nothing, which of course asks the huge question, why on earth are we sending millions and millions of pounds to France if nothing is happening to deter these people from coming over?
Well, quite, Martin. There's shock and anger here about what's happened. These incidents have become all too frequent. It was only in January that 5 migrants died off exactly the same beach near Boulogne-sur-Mer. But what was particularly horrific about yesterday is exactly as you say, there was a skirmish beforehand on the beach. The picture I've got of what happened is that there were people, including women and children, on the boat, and suddenly a gang of young men ran down the beach to effectively want to take the place of the women and children and their husbands, for example. And that's where the real trouble started. The police did what they always do over here, which is throw tear gas canisters out. What that's going to do to stop people jumping onto a boat, I don't know. It didn't work in this case. And on the contrary, there was some very serious violence on the beach. And then once the gang was in the water, the French police withdrew completely and left these young men to get on the boat. And then what did we have? Potentially murders, Martin. I mean, I'm speaking as strongly as that because that's the word that's being used at the moment. These men were absolutely determined to make sure they had a place on that boat, and they didn't care who had to come off because they wanted that place. There's a picture after this horrific instance, would you believe, of this boat sailing to Britain with all these young men sitting on the side, punching the air, cheering about what's happened and saying, look, we've got our place. We're on the way to England. And would you believe it, they're being escorted by the French Navy up until the line in the Channel, which the demarcation line between Britain and French waters. And then the British authorities take them on and take them to England. I was speaking to the state prosecutor here yesterday evening, and he suggested that those responsible for this appalling tragedy might well be claiming asylum in Britain today. That could be what happened, although we have heard of these arrests now in Britain, of course, as well, Martin.
And Peter, we are seeing pictures on screen now of that rescue mission, of that dinghy coming over towards Dover. And another astonishing point, Peter, is that when the police intervened, when the craft was still quite close to the shore, when this capsize happened and the skirmish occurred, the next thing that happened is that 48 migrants were returned to France. Presumably those are the ones who've been shoved off this dinghy. But 58 simply refused to leave that dinghy despite what had happened, despite the fatalities. And then, Peter, the French Navy escorted them towards British waters. Astonishing when you think we're paying for this.
It's astonishing, Martin, and it's utterly macabre. Can you imagine? It was so obviously a crime scene. You say quite rightly that people were taken off the boat and returned to Boulogne. Among those taken off were 5 dead people, including a young child aged between 4 and 7. We don't know her full identity at the moment, but aged around that age. Her father fell into the arms of charity workers when he got to the shore and said, I've not only just seen my daughter dying in front of me, but I've also seen men who've taken her place in the boat, travelling off to England with big smiles on their faces. Can you believe a more macabre, horrific situation? And as you say, they were travelling to England with the help of the French authorities, and then the British authorities treated just like normal people who wanted to get over. No concern at all for the people they'd left behind, the 5 dead people they'd left behind. Unbelievable scenes, Martin.
So, Peter, the scene you're explaining there is not only horrific, but it paints a picture of somebody who's potentially responsible, certainly in the eyes of the father of the girl who died, responsible for that death, who simply sailed into Britain, now in custody. The next question is then, can that father give evidence, identify this person? Can we take this case forward? This is an astonishing revelation, Peter Allen.
It really is. The whole thing is very, very complicated, Martin. Over here, there is a judicial inquiry into what's happened. A prosecutor in Boulogne has opened an inquiry into manslaughter. That's the charge at the moment. That can be changed. At the moment, it's a charge of manslaughter against people unknown. That means that they will be trying to make arrests over here. There have been some arrests in connection with this incident, but we don't know at the moment whether they're alleged people who have carried out manslaughter or they're people who helped launch the boat. We don't know that at the moment. These inquiries can take a very, very long time, anything up to 2 years sometimes. And they are often become incredibly complicated when they become cross-channel inquiries. The British and the French don't have a great record of working together to bring criminals to justice in this kind of a way. You would hope in a situation like this, when you're dealing with 5 deaths, things might be speeded up, cooperation might be a lot better. But I wouldn't hold my breath. We've got to see what's going to happen. But as I say, an inquiry has been launched over here, and you would hope that it will be in conjunction with the British, Martin.
Peter Allen, incredible stuff. A manslaughter case has been launched in France, and perhaps the people responsible for that are now in Britain in custody here because they were simply waved across the channel by the French. Peter Allen, incredible stuff. Thank you so much for joining us on the show from Paris today. Whew. Now it's the final week to see how your next holiday could be on us, with your chance to win a Greek cruise for 2, £10,000 in cash and luxury travel gifts. It's worth a prize worth over £20,000 and it could be yours. Don't miss out. And here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, the Prime Minister says the UK and Germany will provide unwavering support for Ukraine and has urged other European countries to stand against Russian aggression. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I wonder, is this the fundamental distinction we need to make between Islam, which is a private religion people may practice freely amongst themselves, and Islamism, when you try and place those values upon other people, place that way of being, force it on people who don't want it?
Tom, I have been very much clear about this thing, that Islam is a religion and people are free to follow that religion in the UK, in a free Western society. So we have no problem with people following their religion as long as it is not being imposed onto the wider society. And when you talk about drawing a distinction between Islam and Islamism, people like me, you and me, we are drawing that distinction. We're trying to maintain that distinction. But if you look at the commentator from the Muslim community, some commentator, they would like to blur this line and they would ask you, what is Islamism? Where does it exist? Sorry, it does exist. We see it. And the teacher, this incident is an epitome of that kind of, ideology being prevalent, in our society.
Khadija, do you worry that these views are typical for some sections of society? Do you think that there's a problem with some Muslim men, that they have perhaps views that we don't consider to be British values?
There are certain readings of religion which are misogynistic, which are discriminatory, which are homophobic. We need to be honest about it. We need to be calling it out whenever we hear these kind of views. It's been a long time that we are letting these kind of ideologies crawling in, spreading tentacles in British society, and we are just ignoring it in the name of respecting people's culture and religion. You are not suppressed in the UK.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 3:24. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, let's get more on Rishi Sunak's visit to Berlin, announcing more security cooperation with Germany. Of course, it follows yesterday's announcement on a huge increase in UK defence spending. The Prime Minister said the UK and Germany would provide unwavering support for Ukraine and urged other European countries to stand against Russian aggression. Well, I'm joined now in our studio in Westminster by our political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, welcome. Always a delight. So yesterday we got the numbers, 75 billion in additional funding. Today, a strengthening of the alliance with the Germans. Rishi Sunak calling it a new chapter, the biggest strengthening of our national defence in a generation, and historic warming to the Germans.
That's right, and it's one of the big press conferences for the PM to do with the Chancellor of Germany. I think it was him almost reclaiming the right to be the foreign affairs spokesman for this country. He's succeeded that, hasn't he, to David Cameron in recent months. His last trip overseas was to Egypt, I think, for the COP climate summit, which I went to with the Prime Minister, not Egypt, but the Middle East with the Prime Minister. But it's clear that he was out there. He was on the front foot. He was quizzed in the questions after. How can you spend all this money on the defence? Can you keep cutting taxes? He said yes. He said this is a funded plan. I'll cut the civil service headcount to make this country safer. I mean, it's kind of the Tory MPs are cooing with delight, like having their tummies tickled like big pussycats over in House of Parliament. They're delighted with this. Labour hasn't got an answer so far. Earlier, Emily Thornberry, who's the Shadow Attorney General, she was quizzed by this very fact for our breakfast programme. Here's what I had to say.
Said several weeks ago that we wanted to move towards spending 2.5% on defence, and indeed when we were in power last, that was about the amount of money that we were spending. But we will do it as circumstances allow. We'll be looking with some interest at whether or not the government produces any details in relation to this, because, you know, the Prime Minister yesterday essentially committed to spending another £75 billion on defence by 2030. So they produced this 22-page document, and not a single line of it was on where the money was coming from. Now, hopefully it'll come in the near future, just like we're hoping that they're going to give us the details on the £46 billion that it's going to cost them to get rid of national insurance. They haven't given us any details on that either. I mean, as we get closer to an election, we're going to get more and more of this, you know, and I know that your programme will hold the government to account in the way that you hold us to account, and that if people want to say they want to spend money, they need to tell us where the money is going to come from, because in the end it's the public that needs to pay for it.
Well, she's changed her tune, because like 12 days ago, it was Labour saying we will commit 2.5% GDP to defence. So that's what Rishi Sunak did yesterday. Now she's saying we won't do that.
Well, the difference is Labour was saying when it's affordable, because they're very nervous about spending money that they haven't got, and they can be accused of being profligate with our money if they become the government. Rishi Sunak says his plan is costed, and he's set the costs out and the terms out, and that means he can say, look, here are my workings, where are Labour workings? Labour is saying wait till we have a spending review on defence in the first year of a Labour government, and then we'll work it out. So you have got a clear dividing line, Martin, for the election. Vote Tory, we will guarantee getting to 2.5% by 2030, and here are our workings. Labour can't say that, and that's a problem for Labour at the moment, I think.
Because it's funny, because Emily Thornberry there was like saying, well, this is uncosted. They can't afford it. That sounds like what normally the Conservatives say.
Well, you heard it the way
about
around. Also, she attacked the Tory party over their plans to get rid of the national insurance, saying it's 46 billion. To be fair to the Tory party, were they here, they would say, well, that's an ambition at some point in the next few parliaments. It's not really a set-in-stone thing. This is a set spending plan for the next 5 or 6 years from the PM, and it has, I think, caught Labour napping slightly. It hasn't gone as far as 3% of GDP, just 2.5%, which Grant Shapps are calling for, the Defence Secretary, as recently as last month in the Daily Mail. So, but it is showing clear ambition. When Boris Johnson announced it in 2022, there was no idea of how to get there. Difference is, here's a plan of action.
And sad news, we must mark the passing of Frank Field, of course, a multi-generational Labour luminaire. What I was struck by today, Chris, everywhere you looked, even from the Telegraph, the Express, you know, the true blue Tory media, everybody saying kind words about Frank Field.
Yeah, he reached across the divide in a way that few politicians can do. He's the kind of politician you can imagine a statue going up for him in his Birkenhead seat that he represented for 40 years. Died at age 81, minister under Tony Blair's government. He was urged to think the unthinkable famously by Tony Blair on welfare reform. Labour didn't quite like what he came up with. I mean, he was basically a true free thinker. He didn't like food banks. He fought very hard to get more money for the poor. He thought he worked hard on the food bank agenda. I spoke to him certainly a few times when I was at the Telegraph. A truly great man, respected across the board, and much missed.
And lots of anecdotes across the board today of members of the public who said that they approached him on a train or in the streets, both in Birkenhead or in London, on his way down here, and all of them said that he always took the time to chat to them about politics, was convivial, was always impeccably dressed, even in his final years when he was clearly ill, but sadly missed, irrespective of your political stripes.
And very quietly spoken, he was elevated to the House of Lords in 2020. He had just had a burning desire, I think, to help those less fortunate than us. And he did all he could to help them. He's widely respected across the divide, and you heard the remarks from Speaker of the House of Commons, Oliver Dowden standing in for Rishi Sunak at PMQs, and also from the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner. Hugely missed character, and I think this is the kind of politician which most MPs should aspire to be.
Chris Oak, thank you very much for joining us, and Frank Field, rest in peace. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, and I'll bring you a wonderful story about the Second World War hero who celebrated his 102nd birthday in style. Now, take it from me, he looks younger than me. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Edison.
Thanks, Martin. It's 3:30. Our top stories this afternoon. 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl in the English Channel yesterday. The National Crime Agency says they were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. Now, those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. It comes as figures from the Home Office show that more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. 3 people have been injured in a reported stabbing at a secondary school in the south of Wales. Police say 1 person has been arrested after the incident at Amman Valley School. Wales Air Ambulance provided 3 critical care teams and 2 air ambulances. The school says the families of the injured have been informed. The Deputy Prime Minister took aim at Labour today for failing to back the government's increased spending on defence. Standing in for the Prime Minister at today's PMQs, Oliver Dowden said the party had been silent on whether it backs investment in the armed forces. But Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, says the government has been quietly cutting funds for the army.
The difference is that we haven't cut the army to its smallest size since Napoleon. And Mr. Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
OK, for the latest stories, why not sign up for GB News alerts by scanning the QR code? It's on the right-hand side of your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's take a look at today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2446 and 1.1631 euros. Price of gold, £1,863 and 35 pence, that's per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,057 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Ray. Now, there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, North Yorkshire. The southbound A1M still closed from junction 48 to 47. That's Barrow Bridge down towards Allerton Park, also around the routes queuing. Not least that southbound A1M slow back towards Thirsk now at junction 49 is due to investigation work. Now the westbound M62 junction 27 to 26. That's Gildersham to Chain Bar struggling, a lane shut at the scene of a collision. Southbound M6 struggling, there's a broken down lorry. It's around about Sandbach and Crewe 17 southbound. Lane 1 is out. The M6 southbound at the M5 interchange junction 8 stop start following an early obstruction on the road. And then finally the clockwise M25 junction 16 to Maple Cross at 17 slow going at the scene of a collision that's now safely been moved to the hard shoulder. And that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Organisations, plural, because there's loads of people doing this. The organisations are charging schools to be part of this odd league table about who's trying to outdo who when it comes to who is more trans inclusive with the kids than the next person. There's something that makes me uneasy about this.
Supposing a child comes home and says, you think, oh, I've done well today. He said, well, how have you done? He said, well, I was #1 painter, or I was #1 reader. No, I wasn't. I was made LGBT champion. This is a 4- and 5-year-old. Look, I can understand this, actually, as we develop into the secondary school. I can understand more debates taking place. I cannot understand why we have to thrust it at young children. And I think if you ask the parents, they'd be hostile to it. And what about the role the teacher has to play in all this?
Society has been one way, the pendulum is swinging the other way, and they're pushing it very far in order to kind of proliferate change. Mm-hmm. And this is probably the toughest period in that evolutionary process, because the LGBTQ plus community is saying that you've got to really rage against the machine to get people to listen. Because put it like this now, even this conversation, the whole country is listening, the whole world is listening. These are the kinds of eyeballs and ears they haven't had before. And there's going to be friction. There's going to be a locking of heads in the process to getting to a point where you establish a new equilibrium where they feel more incorporated. Like I've said, the greatest force of allies that the LGBTQ plus community has always had is heterosexual women. What you're moving towards now is doing things that is beginning to turn them from allies into people who feel that, oh, for you to thrive, I'm being deprived, and that's a problem. When they realize you're alienating allies, they will understand you've got to recalibrate to have that kind of understanding between both parties.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:37. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Former DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has appeared in court charged with rape and a number of other historical sex offences. Sir Geoffrey made his way through a media scrum when he arrived at Newry Magistrates Court earlier, and his wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, also appeared in court to face charges in relation to the same police investigation. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie. Dougie, welcome to the show, and what's the latest?
Well, good afternoon, Martin. Welcome to Newry Courthouse. And I must say I've been a member of the media in Northern Ireland for decades, and this was one of the biggest news days I have seen. And that's because Geoffrey Donaldson was such a big political animal here. I mean, if you take a look at his CV, I mean, he ran the campaigns for Enoch Powell back in the 80s. He was the longest serving MP in Northern Ireland, and he is also one of the co-signatories of Theresa Theresa May's government the confidence and supply arrangements. So he's been right at the forefront of politics. So you can imagine at the end of March, when he was arrested with these allegations, the media were here in their droves, as was the security presence. Sir Geoffrey had to run the gauntlet through them, as did his co-accused, Lady Eleanor Donaldson. They both appeared in the dock, two prison officers flanking either side of them, while they heard the charges being read out. Now, there was 15 charges between the two of them, 11 of those going to Geoffrey Donaldson, 1 of rape, 1 of gross indecency, and 9 of sexual assault. His wife had 4 charges of aiding and abetting, and that was over a 21-year period. Now, they've both been released on bail. The court will sit again here on the 22nd of May, but on the way out of the court here behind us, by that stage a large crowd of people had gathered around, and they mixed in with the media, and the police had a serious time trying to push not only those crowds back, but ourselves, as he and his wife both come under massive insults. So the court will sit again on the 22nd of May, and there it will hear further evidence, although it is not expected Sir Geoffrey or his wife will appear on that date.
Okay, thank you, Dougie Donnelly, live there from Newry Magistrates Court. Now, let's bring you some breaking news on the reported school stabbing in southwest Wales, and pupils are being released from Aman Valley School, which has been in lockdown following an incident in which 3 people were injured at about 11 o'clock this morning. Many of the parents who had gathered outside the school tearfully hugged their children after they walked out of the school from 3:20 p.m. and 1 person has been arrested. Now, moving on, a man who served in the Special Forces during the Second World War celebrated his 102nd birthday in style at a 5-star hotel in London, and he invited GB News along to share his wonderful day. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The odd shower towards the south today, but otherwise it's fine with sunny spells, especially much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've got an area of high pressure towards the northwest of the UK. However, we've still got this northerly breeze bringing cool conditions countrywide, and it's going to feel especially cool on the North Sea coast. Any showers in the south will disappear into the evening, but there'll be further showers into the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, and 1 or 2 developing across Wales and western England. Now, where we avoid the showers, where we get some clear spells, temperatures will fall away at such a frost first thing on Thursday. A chilly start, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, central England. However, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine first thing, and we keep the largely fine and sunny weather for western Scotland, northwest England, for example. Elsewhere, a bit more cloud compared with today, and a few more showers developing, particularly for parts of England and Wales, eastern Scotland. Still that cool breeze for the North Sea coast, 8 or 9 Celsius at best for some North Sea areas, but otherwise elsewhere into the double figures. Now, Friday starts off frosty, a chilly start in the east of England in particular, but otherwise a few showers and some sunny spells expected. More unsettled weather arrives from the south through the weekend.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:44. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, a reminder of the news I broke a few minutes ago, and pupils are being released from Ammon Valley School, which has been in lockdown following an incident in which 3 people were injured at about 11 o'clock this morning, and 1 person has been arrested. Now, the last surviving member of a Special Forces regiment during World War II has fulfilled his dream to dine at the Ritz Hotel in London as he celebrated his 102nd birthday in style. Chelsea pensioner John Morris volunteered for the Raiding Support Regiment and took part in the Allied invasion of Italy. Well, Cameron Walken went along to meet him.
It's not glamorous. We thought it was, actually, when you're young.
John Morris is the last surviving member of his SAS regiment from the Second World War. Before joining the Special Forces, his service began in Kent, shooting down German bombers targeting London.
The only thing I shot down actually was a chimney, kitchen chimney, accidentally by mistake. Nobody had any breakfast that morning. I wasn't very popular.
John was one of the last people to receive a 100th birthday card from Queen Elizabeth II.
All birthday cards from the children from Christchurch School.
Celebrating his 102nd birthday this week, local school children made him cards, thanking him for his bravery.
I think kids should know more about the sacrifice their forefathers made. Not me, I'm no hero, but all the RAF boys had died, and people like that, they don't realise that. They don't know much about it. They don't even know who Hitler was, half of them.
John, who's now a Chelsea pensioner, kindly agreed to share his wartime memories. In 1943, he was sent to North Africa with the Royal Artillery and passed Special Forces selection, taking part in the Allied invasion of Italy.
75,000 British and colonial troops were killed in Italy. The Germans fought back very well.
Ultimately, the Allies were successful, but a much more powerful natural threat was not far away. Mount Vesuvius, famous for destroying the Roman town of Pompeii in AD 79, erupted.
I woke up in the morning, heard this rumble, looked outside, this wall of lava coming down. So never go on a volcanic island where I am, because it's very dangerous.
That year, Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy. Known as D-Day, the operation led to the liberation of Western Europe and was one of the most famous and widely praised successes of the war. Far away in Italy, John and his comrades were branded with a less than flattering nickname, turned into a popular wartime song.
We've already done 3 D-Days. We did the North African landing, we did the Battle of Britain, and we did the Italian landing, we did the Yugoslavia, Albania, and they called us D-Day Dodgers.
John celebrated his 102nd in style. First a party with the Chelsea pensioners, followed by a champagne lunch, organised by friend and Irish Guards ambassador Frederike Crum.
The Ritz always had a wonderful relationship with the Chelsea pensioners. We celebrate in style, and he's never been to the Ritz, so that will be worthy of the 102nd birthday. Right, John?
That's right.
Cameron Walker, GB News.
A magnificent story, the very best of British. And I'm joined in the studio now by GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and the writer, columnist and journalist Emma Wolfe. Welcome, both of you, to the show. Let's start with that story there, Emma. Warms your cockles. John Morris, 102, whatever that bloke's drinking. I'd like a pint of it. He looks younger than me.
He does. And isn't it great to see someone over 100 in such, I mean, mentally so sharp, physically in great shape? What I think when I see people like that is I think, what a shame that our young people now don't have that same drive. I mean, they were young, they were teenagers, these young men, when they went, and same as my father, when they went to war, went to fight for our country, and they had a purpose, and they had a mission, and they had a motivation. And I think the problem with young people is that they don't have any of that. They don't have any direction, they don't have any sense of discipline. You know, I mean, look at John Morris and look at the life that he's led.
And talking of legendary lives, Nigel, let's reflect, if we can, upon the sad passing of Frank Field, a Labour luminaire across many decades and a man you knew.
Yeah, we were friends for years. And, I mean, Frank was sort of bubbling with new ideas. Tony Blair brought him in to think the unthinkable on welfare. And, boy, did he think the unthinkable. Yeah. And he'd come up with a load of different ideas. I mean, some, not all of them were wonderful. I remember him telling me one day about how to deal with neighbours from hell. And his idea was to house them under motorway bridges. And you kind of looked at him and said, Frank, you sure that's going to work?
That's a Lee Anderson idea.
Yes, exactly. No, I mean, when it came to actually right or left, Frank could be either side. He was a Brexiteer. So although he was Labour through and through, he could still see the other side of the coin.
And many, many anecdotes I was struck by today, Emma, irrespective of where you looked, in the depths of the Daily Telegraph comments, the Daily Mail comments, so many people, true blue Conservatives, said they met Frank either up north in Birkenhead or in London or on trains or just travelling about, and they stopped and they shook his hand and spoke to him, and he always took time to speak to people about politics.
Across the spectrum, it's been just, you know, what a wonderful man, and, you know, we shall not see his like. No one has had a bad word to say about Frank Field, have they? And I think Nigel puts his finger on it exactly. It's that ability to see both sides, but also to take the other point of view, and to be genuinely a conviction politician. And sadly, I think we're lacking those.
Both John Morris and Frank Field made of the right stuff.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to another debate. Let's start with you, Nigel. Two-tier policing, conversation we talk about a lot. Yesterday came to a head on St George's Day. The police, very differently attired. You can see on your screens there, they were in full riot gear, and they later appeared on horseback. They went into the crowd. These lads were on a St George's Day rally. They later on closed all of the pubs across Westminster after, I think, 4 arrests. And it's making people say, Nigel, you don't see this sort of policing at the pro-Palestine protests. In fact, there's one of those due to kick off in about 2 hours' time. Have we got two-tier policing? And did yesterday's policing prove that?
No, we haven't. I mean, I watched that demo from my window in the House of Commons, and what you could see is, this was before the trouble started, what you could see is that there was an undercurrent where there might be trouble. So what the police were doing, they were preparing for it. They weren't in riot gear at that point. They were carrying their helmets, but they weren't in full riot gear. The demonstrators had agreed a place not far from here, Richmond Terrace, so a couple of minutes walk from here, had agreed a place where they would gather. They then tried to break out of that and through the police cordon, and that's when the violence started. That's not two-tier policing. What the police did was what they would do with any group who did the same thing.
Emma, I've been on the protests of both sides. I've been on the Armistice Day one where it kicked off. I've been on the pro-Palestine marches where it kicked off. Well, they threw stuff at me, and the police were soft-soaping. They were standing aside, and they didn't have any riot gear drawn. Do you think we are witnessing two-tier policing?
Yes, I do, and I think it's everybody in London specifically is aware of this. I don't understand why it needs to be incendiary, that we would celebrate as the English, we would celebrate St George's Day. I don't know why we need to feel apologetic about that. It's not racist or xenophobic in any way.
It's the Welsh people who were protesting, though, wasn't it? I mean, it's not the event. Absolutely, you're right. Celebrate St George's Day, absolutely. The kind of people who were doing it were there to cause some violence.
Well, hang on. But you're reading into that. Some of them are proud English people. That it's
I don't mean all of them, yeah. You're absolutely right, yeah.
And it inflames it when the police, as you say, they're sort of expecting unrest, and it sets the scene for something that's going to be violent. And could they not be proud English people wanting to celebrate St George's Day the same way that the Welsh celebrate St David's, the same way that the Scottish fly the saltire? We don't object to that.
And Emma, after I left the studio yesterday, and there were a load of them in the pubs around here. The pubs were shut, as I said earlier, at 7:30. One thing they specifically mentioned to me, Nigel, was that they saw the police statement go out where the Metropolitan Police called them far right, and that specifically got their shackles up. So why are you calling us far right? We are patriots. We're here to do a St George's rally. The police using that kind of language was inflammatory. That's all they said. What do you reckon?
Well, I mean, not all of them were far right, and as I was just saying to Emma, that some of them were there to absolutely celebrate St George's Day.
How do you know any of them were far right?
Tommy Robinson was there. You can't get much righter than Tommy Robinson. He came to address that crowd. So yes, I think that it was perfectly reasonable to think we are dealing with a number of far right people. Doesn't make all of them far right.
OK, thank you, gents. We'll see you in the next hour. Now, pupils are being released from Ammon Valley School in south-west Wales. It's been in lockdown, of course, since following an incident in which 3 people were injured at about 11 o'clock this morning. 1 person has been arrested. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, but now it's time for your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The odd shower towards the south today, but otherwise it's fine with sunny spells, especially in much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've got an area of high pressure towards the northwest of the UK. However, we've still got this northerly breeze bringing cool conditions countrywide, and it's going to feel especially cool on the North Sea coast. Any showers in the south will disappear into the evening, but there'll be further showers into the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, and 1 or 2 developing across Wales and western England. Now, where we avoid the showers, where we get some clear spells, temperatures will fall away at such a frost first thing on Thursday. A chilly start, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, central England. However, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine first thing, and we keep the largely fine and sunny weather for western Scotland, northwest England, for example. Elsewhere, a bit more cloud compared with today, and a few more showers developing, particularly for parts of England and Wales, eastern Scotland. Still that cool breeze for the North Sea coast, 8 or 9 Celsius at best for some North Sea areas, but otherwise elsewhere into the double figures. Now, Friday starts off frosty, a chilly start in the east of England in particular, but otherwise a few showers and some sunny spells expected. More unsettled weather arrives from the south through the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley to Yorkshire. Firstly, the southbound A1M, junction 48 to 47. That's Boroughbridge down towards Allerton Parks, queuing back to Thirsk at junction 49, and surrounding routes struggling too is for investigation work. Now, there's been a collision westbound on the M62, so junction 27 to 26, that's Gildersham to Chain Bar, a lane shut, queuing for about half an hour back to Tingley at junction 28. Northbound M1, a lane shut on the exit slip. There's a breakdown at Catcliffe junction 33. Southbound M6 struggling. There's a broken down lorry around the turn off of Sandbach and Crewe at 17. The inside lane is coned off. And queuing clockwise on the M25, a lane shut for emergency repairs. Potters Bar 24 to Enfield 25, queuing back to 23. And that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, pupils are being released from a school in South Wales which had been in lockdown following reports of a stabbing there. 3 people have been injured and 1 arrested. And 3 people have been arrested after 5 migrants died in the latest Channel tragedy yesterday. And it's emerged French police stood by and simply allowed a dinghy crammed with a record 112 asylum seekers to set sail for England. And is it time to pull the plug on the hundreds of millions of pounds we paid the French? And tough talk on security from Rishi Sunak. He's in Berlin talking up a partnership with Germany to provide unwavering support for Ukraine. But can the UK really afford this multi-billion-pound rise in defence spending? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. It's always a delight to have your company. Shortly, we'll be talking about the Rwanda bill. Is it the silver bullet to end the chaos, end the arrivals? Well, since it came in, OK, it hasn't been passed in law yet. Since it was voted through, we've seen a record amount come over, including another tragedy. Is this really the answer, or is it a multi-billion-pound white elephant? Get in touch the usual ways. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Get stuck in, and I'll read out the best, so long as you keep them, well, not too fruity. But before all of that, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Edison.
Thanks, Martin. Coming up to 2 minutes past 4, our top stories this hour. Pupils are being released after 3 people were injured in a reported stabbing at a secondary school in the south of Wales. Amman Valley School has been in lockdown since 11 a.m. Police say 1 person has been arrested. Wales Air Ambulance provided 3 critical care teams and 2 air ambulances. Parents gathered outside the school. They could be seen tearfully hugging their children as they emerged. 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl in the English Channel yesterday. The National Crime Agency says they were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. Those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. It comes as figures from the Home Office show that more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. The Prime Minister insists his defence spending pledge is fully funded, though he declined to rule out cuts in other areas. The government has committed to reaching 2.5% of GDP by 2030 and is encouraging other members of the NATO alliance to match that amount. Speaking in Berlin, next to his German counterpart, Rishi Sunak said rising conflicts around the world are making defence spending more urgent.
As a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognising the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defence spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defence spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies and the two largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends, as you said, for as long as it takes.
The Deputy Prime Minister says he's confident that the government will keep its election manifesto promise to ban no-fault evictions. But there was some uncertainty at today's PMQs over when the long-promised ban might take effect. That's after Community Secretary Michael Gove said it would be up to the House of Lords to decide the rate of progress. Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, says the government has made empty promises.
For 14 years, they failed renters, they failed leaseholders and they failed mortgage holders. But, Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
The former leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, has been released on bail. Northern Ireland's longest-serving MP was suspended from the DUP following his arrest last month for what's been described as historical sex charges, including one count of rape. His wife has also been charged with aiding and abetting in relation to the same investigation. In his resignation letter, he said he would be strenuously contesting the allegations. The government is set to face a High Court challenge against its XL bully ban. Campaign group Don't Ban Me, Licence Me has been given permission to bring legal action against the Department for Environment and Rural Affairs. The large bulldog-type American breed was added to the banned list in October last year following a series of attacks. Campaigners argue that the ban is unlawful and irrational, but government lawyers say the challenge should be dismissed. Several military horses on the loose in central London this morning have now been contained. Video posted to social media appeared to show one of the animals covered in blood. At least 4 people were injured as they galloped their way through the busy city streets. Westminster Police says they'll now be transported to receive veterinary care. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Martin.
Thank you, Ray. Now we start with this afternoon's breaking news. And pupils have started to leave a school in Carmarthenshire in southwest Wales after a reported stabbing incident earlier this morning. The school was in lockdown for a number of hours and 3 people were injured and 1 person has been arrested. I'm joined now by our home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, astonishing how to think that at home time, at pickup time today, those pupils running into their parents' arms, having been through this incredible ordeal.
Yes, and those pupils are now being allowed out of the school, having been locked down for a number of hours and interviewed by police at the scene as they went classroom to classroom to speak to them about the incident, to gain any information that they might have about what unfolded at the Ammon Valley School earlier today. We know that 3 people were injured. 1 person has been arrested. We are expecting an update from Dyfed-Powys Police, a senior officer who will be reading a statement, not taking any questions, we're told, but reading a statement outside the school at 5:30 today to give us an indication, hopefully, of what the exact facts are. Beyond the statement that 3 people have been injured, we have had reports, and Karen Davis, who's one of the the school governors, has been quoted as saying that she's been told 2 teachers were injured in this incident. The third person who was injured, we have no details on them, but one of the injured, we understand, was flown some 70 miles to hospital, to the University of Wales Hospital in Cardiff for treatment. The incident itself has been contained. Police are investigating what was behind this incident, but clearly, as you said, a great deal of concern amongst those parents, Martin, because hundreds of parents were outside the school gates not knowing if their child had been caught up in the incident for quite some time afterwards, until we got a statement that really came through from the school about an hour and a half ago that said all of those who were injured, the parents of those pupils, have been informed that their loved ones were caught up in this. So if you hadn't been notified by the police, then you could assume that your child was not caught up in this incident.
Thank you, Mark White. I'll tell you what, if I was one of those parents, I think I'd hug my child and not let go of them all night. Well, thank you, mate. We'll, of course, bring you regular updates from that very worrying incident throughout the show. But now to the news that 3 men have been arrested after 5 migrants, including a child, tragically died yesterday. And the National Crime Agency has confirmed the men were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. The men were 2 Sudanese nationals, aged 22 and 19, and also a South Sudan national who is aged 22. Now, of course, the tragedy in the Channel happened just hours after the Rwanda bill cleared Parliament, and Priti Patel, who negotiated the deal with Rwanda 2 long years ago, is adamant that the plan will work. She said it is important to recognise that other countries are looking to copy our partnership, with EU nations taking an interest in the plans I put forward because of the positive difference that they can make. She also... And I'm joined now in the studio by our political editor, Chris Hope, and also the Conservative MP for Torbay, Kevin Foster. Welcome to you both, gents. Chris, let's start with you. So Rwanda was meant to be the silver bullet. It was meant to put a stop to this. Hasn't been passed into law yet. It has been voted through. But since it has been voted through, if anything, we've seen the floodgates open and yet another tragedy.
I was fascinated by those remarks there from Priti Patel, because there's a battle for the right of the party going on. Priti Patel is saying, I'm more of a moderate person for any future leadership contest, if there is going to be one. She's almost defining herself against Suella Braverman, who's making the very point you're making. She thinks it's not going to work, along with Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister, who quit over the idea of individual challenges, and that's why you've got this scepticism in the party whether it's going to work. The hope is that it will work for the government's point of view. It's not law yet, Martin. The King signs it off probably tomorrow. When that happens, that triggers all sorts of things happening behind the scenes. Kevin Foster might know more of this, but you'll have letters going out to those who have been told they're going to go on the first flights out to Rwanda. If it was really going to work, though, I think, forget those who have been here for 13 months. You need to say the next people arriving here are going to Rwanda. Start stopping the arrivals. Don't deal with the kind of those who are here already. Earlier, we spoke to Labour's Jenny Chapman, frontbencher in the Cabinet Office, and we said to her, will Labour axe this even if it works? And she has something very interesting to say earlier on PMQ's Live.
If it did, as a major leap of a thought experiment, then we might be having a different conversation. Okay. But there's absolutely no evidence this is going to work because we're up against the people traffickers and the people smugglers, and the news flash is they lie to people. They take their money, they put them in boats, they make them risk their lives, they're lying to people, and that is not going to stop because we spend £500 million spending a really small number of people to Rwanda when you've got hundreds of thousands coming.
OK, let's bring in Kevin now. So, Kevin Foster, you're obviously an advocate of the Rwanda bill. You think it's going to work. Tell us why, when we have only 150 watertight cases earmarked to leave the country, that will make any difference when over 400 arrived in a single day yesterday.
Well, the core part of the Rwanda plan is breaking the basis of the people smugglers business model, which is the idea that you've left a safe and democratic country, you've come here, even if we turn down your claim, we can't return you to the third country you've left. And also, because of the either domestic policies or the situation in your own country, so, for example, somewhere like Syria, we can't return you there. So to break that model, where then the people smuggler argues you, well, that means you'll end up staying in Britain regardless of the decision, actually we can say, well, if it was safety you were looking for, we can meet that by working with a third country, Rwanda. You can be transferred there. There are specialists in resettlement of refugees, and it breaks that link between playing as people smuggler and then remaining here in the UK. And in terms of the impact, when we first announced it, we did see a drop. Well, this is the core now, is about operationalising this plan and then as part of wider measures to tackle the overall problem.
Next, the fangs are going to be bared from the lawyers, from the ECHR, the NGOs, the Home Office, the charities, the archbishops, the church. They'll all be out to try and stop this getting off the ground, as we learned through Brexit. And I hate to bring that up, but I think the historical hangover is similar. Are you confident that despite the entire weight of the establishment going out to try and derail Rwanda, it will go ahead?
Well, I think the difference compared to the Brexit years is we have a clear and decisive majority in the House of Commons backing this and deal with. The problems going back 5 years ago was that every time the government tried to get a deal through or to try to actually agree for us to leave, people would not agree to it. This time around, there's a decisive majority and a clear will of the elected House of Parliament to get on with this. And I think many people across the country wanting to see a solution implemented to this problem. And we know across Europe, others are looking at the Rwanda plan because they face exactly the same challenge. What do we do with people who we can't return to the third country that was safe and democratic they've left? We can't, for whatever reason, return them to their own country, i.e. because they just won't accept enforced removals. Well, how do we break that? And that's where bringing in something like the Rwanda plan makes that difference.
How soon can you get the regular rhythm of flights taking off, Kevin Foster? Because you're former Home Office Minister in charge of migration.
Again, I suspect the government will give a timescale that's slightly longer than they expect it to be, because it's
sooner than July.
It's not a simple process from as we talk about actually bringing people into detention. Because the moment you give someone a notice that they're being considered for Rwanda, you need to bring them into immigration detention for very obvious reasons. You then need to work the case, any final objections to their removal, and then actually the physical process of getting them onto a plane is not as simple. You know, people think that someone's just going to walk onto the plane. That's certainly not the experience we've had on removals flights, but it can be done, and I'm sure it will be done. OK,
let's move on to defence. Of course, Rishi Sunak in Berlin after yesterday's Warsaw flying visit. 75 billion quid announced yesterday, 2.5% GDP. Moving forward today, a new chapter with Germany promised. The big question is, will this woo the electorate?
Well, you're seeing the PM here doing a 1-2-3 on getting on the electoral front foot. Last Friday, he announced plans to deal with people who shouldn't be claiming benefits, getting them back to work who should be at work in the government's view. Monday, you heard the Rwanda plan being set out, and Tuesday, that was yesterday, there's a huge number of money being spent on defence. Labour so far hasn't got an answer on defence because they're going to wait for their spending review. And he's saying, even in terms in Berlin, the press conference with Olaf Scholz next to him, I will cut taxes and do this. It's quite a change, I think, in a rather Sunak being in a crouch, I think, against all the critics. He's now punching his way out of his paper bag, probably because we've got these local election results next week and the mayoralty elections, which could be awkward for the Tories. He's got some fight left in him.
Look, it has to be said, earlier on, Emily Thornberry wasn't quite so forgiving. Let's see what she had to say.
Said several weeks ago that we wanted to move towards spending 2.5% on defence, and indeed when we were in power last, that was about the amount of money that we were spending. But we will do it as circumstances allow. We'll be looking with some interest at whether or not the government produces any details in relation to this, because, you know, the Prime Minister yesterday essentially committed to spending another £75 billion on defence by 2030. So they produced this 22-page document, and not a single line of it was on where the money was coming from. Now, hopefully it'll come in the near future, just like we're hoping that they're going to give us the details on the £46 billion that it's going to cost them to get rid of national insurance. They haven't given us any details on that either. I mean, as we get closer to an election, we're going to get more and more of this, you know, and I know that your programme will hold the government to account in the way that you hold us to account, and that if people want to say they want to spend money, they need to tell us where the money is going to come from, because in the end it's the public that needs to spend to pay for it.
So there you go, Kevin Foster. Fair to say Emily Thornberry, a little bit angry there, shall we say. She's saying, you've got to hold you to account. Where's the money coming from? So, Kevin, where is the money coming from?
Well, I find it interesting getting a lecture on defence from someone who's so keen to make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister. In fact, was one of his closest lieutenants in the Labour Party. But parking that particular observation, you know, we will clearly set out our fiscal plans, but 2.5%. And the core is, can we afford not to spend this? We're seeing rising threats in the east. We're seeing what's happening in China. We're seeing Russia and the war in Ukraine. And, you know, we are facing a situation similar to the 1930s, where countries had to start looking at the threats that were there. At that time, people argued we can't afford to increase defence, and we know what came next.
Is the PM overstating it? He says that in that speech yesterday, he wants to put the UK defence on a war footing. We're not on the brink of war, he said, nor do we seek it. I mean, these are language which is extraordinary. You wouldn't expect this even a few years ago.
Well, you know, a few years ago, we hadn't had one country in Europe attack another country in Europe and end this type of peace between nations in Europe that existed since May 1945. So, yes, we wouldn't have used that type of language a few years back because we didn't have the type of situation we have in Ukraine today a few years ago. And that is what is changing this scenario, is, you know, we have seen an aggressor prepared to attack another country and seeks to conquer it. And we have to be very clear to our allies that we will stand with them, because the surest way to secure the peace is to prepare for war.
Well, let's see if Rishi Sunak talking tough on the world stage lands with the electorate back here in Blighty. Kevin Foster, thanks for joining us, and also Chris Hope, always a pleasure. Thanks, gents. Now, moving on, the shadow attorney, we've done that bit. Moving on, it is time for the Great British Giveaway. So you can see now your next holiday could be on us here at GB News, with your chance to win a Greek cruise for two, 10 grand in cash and luxury travel gifts on top. It's a prize worth over £20,000 and it could be yours. Don't miss out. And here's all the details you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, the share of British electricity generated by burning coal and gas fell to a record low of just 2.4% this month. But what does this mean for the UK's net zero drive? And are we really able to rely on renewables? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So interestingly, Harry listed the date on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me.
Okay.
Are we just putting two and two together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, you know, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere, I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:24. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, the share of British electricity generated by burning coal and gas fell to a record low of just 2.4% earlier this month. The share of power coming from fossil fuels hit the new low at lunchtime last Monday and lasted for an entire hour. Well, I'm joined now by Angela Knight, who's the former CEO of Energy UK. Angela, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. So, does this spell the end for fossil fuels, or was this a good day when actually the wind was blowing and the sun was out?
And I suspect the demand was also quite low. So if one puts the whole thing into context, you know, it's impossible to build quite so many wind farms as we've built in this country over this last short few years, and particularly some of those that are offshore, without us having a steady increase in the amount of electricity we generate from renewables. So actually, that's a good thing, and I'm glad to see that it's happening. On the other side of the equation, though, because most renewables are intermittent, we can debate what nuclear is, but most as renewables are intermittent, that means that there's got to be an equivalent amount of backup or battery storage or some such available for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine and it's cold and we're all at home and we've put the heating on. So, yeah, there is a balance to be had. And whilst I think it is a good thing that there's this attention on renewables, what worries me is there's nothing like the attention that needs to be there, both on replacing our old nuclear, but also ensuring that we've got gas-fired power stations and gas available, because we will need those, and we'll need them for a long period of time to come.
And Angela, it's very, very important to point out, is it not, that the figure referred to here is the mains power taken, not the total power taken to power industry. You can't run cement mills or brickworks off of mains electricity. That's a completely different thing. So that's a key point. Being able to plug in is completely different to be able to fire up for industry. And the facts remain, do they not, Angela, that even now we're running at, what, 70% reliance on gas? So this cherry picking of stats here?
There's a lot of cherry picking on stats goes on everything. And energy, to my mind, often far more than anything else, because people have this sort of emotional link with the environmental agenda. And so they'll see the environment piece as being absolutely right up at the top, and they'll just plug it regardless. There's another thing about this statistic as well in front of us. It is for a half-hour period. It's not, you know, and the normal day is 24 hours. We shouldn't detract, though, from the point that actually we've got more renewable power, and that's a good thing. At the same time, we should not detract from the point that we need long-term power, reliable, produced by fossil fuels in this country and also by nuclear. And that's why I said earlier that, unfortunately, the focus is only on one part of the whole story. And nobody talks much, really, about the fact that you have to take the electricity from one part of the country to another part of the country. It's the national grid. And the national grid was built to have a few large power stations dotted about in appropriate geographic positions. Now it's taking on a huge number of small small power plant electricity produced from renewables. And the consequence of that is that we have to rebuild the grid. So we're talking about billions and billions of investment required in the grid alone, as well as much more on nuclear. We've got to retain and make sure that our gas is modern and it's upgraded where necessary. And this is going to cost a lot of money. So yes, cherry-picking statistics might be good fun, but it doesn't give the whole answer to something that is very important for all of us in this country and for business. And unfortunately, there's never been the proper debate of who pays, how much, and for what.
And Angela, briefly, if we could, you've hit a key point there, because all of the additional grid, that's extra costs. And green energy proponents like to say all the time, well, it's the cheapest form of energy there is, because, of course, the wind and the sun is free, but the cost of building turbines, the cost of building solar panels, the cost of building the grid to get it to our houses, that all adds up. How cheap actually is green energy compared to more traditional forms?
Well, you see, I don't think it is. Because when the focus is just on green energy, has the price of the windmills come down? The answer is yes. Has the price of the solar panels come down? And the answer is yes. But 1 unit of electricity from renewables also requires another unit of reliable backup. So 1 unit, therefore, of renewable electricity from one power station, one renewable power station, renewable wind farm, say, requires an equivalent of a reliable backup. Therefore, whatever the cost is of a renewable, it's actually more than twice it because of that backup requirement. Unless we're all prepared to say, oh, well, no, it's OK, we'll only switch on the lights when the wind's blowing. And industries say, oh, we'll only do manufacturing when the wind's blowing, which, of course, is a nonsense. And that ability to properly account for renewable backup and the transmission, the whole package, if you like, the ability to do that is there, but it has been ducked by all political parties in favour of just focusing on the one thing called carbon reduction and let's decarbonise our electricity system. And you have to take people with you. It's no use having the big vision thing unless people are with you on that. I mean, the current proposal to try and get us to net zero and cut out, just have electric cars and so on. I mean, the deadlines are ridiculous. They're impossible. And now we've got another deadline, apparently, that's been reduced from 2035 to 2030. It simply can't be done. And actually, it can't be done from an engineering perspective. It can't be done from a financial perspective. And how much are people prepared to pay? Because in the end, there's nobody else that's going to pay for all this except for us as consumers or us as taxpayers. And most of that us is exactly the same people.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Angela Knight, who's the former CEO of Energy UK. Fantastic. Really enjoyed that. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, and I'll discuss very worrying claims of prison wars between Muslim and white gangs. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. 32 minutes past 4. Now, in the US, President Biden has just signed a new aid package for Ukraine into law. It ends months of uncertainty over whether the US would continue supporting Kyiv and comes after the bill passed the House of Representatives on Saturday in a show of bipartisan support. Ukraine's President Zelensky says it reinforces the US as a, quote, beacon of democracy. We have some breaking news for you now. A man has been charged after a 9-year-old girl was kidnapped in Knightsbridge in central London. 56-year-old Robert Prusak was charged with multiple offences, including kidnap and sexual assault on a female under 13 years old. The child was reported missing on Brompton Road in London on Monday. This is a breaking story. We'll bring you more on this as we get it. Our pupils are being released after 3 people were injured in a reported stabbing at a secondary school in the south of Wales. A Man Valley School has been in lockdown since 11 a.m. Police say 1 person has been arrested. Wales Air Ambulance provided 3 critical care teams and 2 air ambulances. Parents gathered outside the school could be seen tearfully hugging their children as they emerged. 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl in the English Channel yesterday. The National Crime Agency says they were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. Those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. It comes as figures from the Home Office show that more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. The Deputy PM says he's confident the government will keep its election manifesto promise to ban no-fault evictions, but there was some uncertainty at today's PMQs over when the long-promised ban might take effect, after Community Secretary Michael Gove said it would be up to the House of Lords to decide the rate of progress. Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, says the government has made empty promises. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Ray. Now, there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News. And here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The southbound A1M is still closed from Boroughbridge to Allerton Park. That's junction 48 to 47, queuing back to Thirsk at junction 49 and surrounding routes continue to queue for investigation work. Westbound M62, all lanes back open now, junction 27 Gilderson to chain bar 26, though still slow following an earlier collision. A lane shut, there's been a bump northbound at the M6 from a junction 24, Ashton and Makerfield up to Bryn 25, that's slow going. On the southbound M6 at Sandbach 17, there's a broken down lorry blocking lane 1. That's heavy. And there's a breakdown westbound on the M4, Chieveley 13 to Hungerford 14, a lane shut and delays. And still queuing clockwise for the M25 as well. Potters Bar slow from 24 to Wakefield at junction 25. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Thus far, it has been a proxy war. It has been the proxies of Iran. But last night, and bear in mind, that this extreme Islamist regime have been in charge since 1979. They have as a very clear objective that Israel should be completely wiped out, launched their first ever attack on Israel. Something like 350 drones, cruise missiles and rockets were fired at Israel. 95% of them were intercepted and shot down, including some action by our own Royal Air Force. We have been appeasing Iran ever since the JCPOA deal as it's known, and this was the deal that President Obama put together, and the idea was we remove sanctions, we free up tens of billions of dollars of frozen money, and in return, Iran will not continue to build a nuclear weapon. And what have they done with that money? Well, it has helped them, of course, to fund Hamas. It's helped them to fund Hezbollah. It's helped them to fund the Houthis. And it directly helped them to fund the rocket attacks on Israel last night. I have been against this deal from day one. I was delighted when Trump was president in America that he pulled the Americans out of it. But you would have thought, wouldn't you, after that response last night, that the West might have learned its lesson. But oh no. Unbelievably, the European Union High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Vice President of the European Commission, Joseph Borrell, said overnight he had spoken with the Iranian Foreign Minister late on Sunday. He said the EU needed to have the best possible relations with Iran. So that's okay, Iran. Just keep firing more rockets. The European Union don't mind.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39. I'm Martin Daubney and you're with me on GB News. Now, 13,000 bobbies on the beat. Well, that's what Labour's promising to fund if it forms the next government. Well, the party has outlined its plans to set up a national police savings body to buy police cars, IT equipment and even forensic services. And new figures reveal massive ranges in the price of police items, with the cost of patrol vehicles nearly doubling in some parts of the country. Well, they believe that the savings made by buying kit nationally will pay for 13,000 extra neighbourhood police officers. Well, I'm joined in the studio by GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and the writer, columnist and journalist and great friend of the show, Emma Wolfe. Welcome to you both. Nigel, let's start with you. The Labour Party, got to say, first of all, they were talking on part privatisation of the NHS, West Streeting, talking tough on defence, now talking tough on law and order. Starting to feel a bit like 1997, but without D-Ream.
It is a bit. A lot of this is coming out of the new Labour playbook. And, I mean, good reason for that. I mean, Tony Blair won 3 elections on the basis of it. We flirted with left-wing policies with Jeremy Corbyn. Whatever you thought of that, the electorate absolutely rejected them in 2019. And now we're back to a changed, more moderate Labour Party, which is left of centre still, but it is more moderate than the one that we saw a couple of years ago.
I won't make any jokes about hopefully Diane Abbott won't be doing the maths on the police force numbers. But Emma, on a serious point, this does sound very much like a Conservative party. It's a very centrist, old-fashioned Labour Party. Tony Blair could be in charge of this. And my question is, I wonder how much Blair is involved.
I wonder. I'm horrified to find myself absolutely behind this and absolutely agreeing with them. Yes, we need more police on the streets. They're saying take back our streets. I think the police in recent years, it's not about resourcing. I think they've become horribly sidetracked by the demos, by cybercrime, by hate crime, by all the other things they're not doing. They're not bothering about people, about low-level crime, burglaries, shoplifting, muggings, the things that actually affect people's everyday lives. When you look at the figures about these disparities of police procurement, it's scandalous. So, for example, to extract data from a mobile phone in Derbyshire costs over £5,000. In Staffordshire, it costs about £1,000. High-performance police vehicles in Merseyside, you'll pay £55,000 for a police high-performance vehicle. In Lancashire, you'll pay £27,000. So literally the amount of millions, I think they will pay for extra police officers on the street if they get this, if they get the keys to number 10. I think this policy absolutely makes sense.
And I think people, irrespective of political stripes, Nigel, they are crying out for just more bobbies on the beat, more policing of how we remember it, where you had a community officer...
In your community.
Who you knew, who you could trust, who wasn't going to arrest you for making a transphobic tweet, but would actually get stuff done.
That's the point. And the 13,000 police officers they're talking about, they're neighbourhood police. These are people who will be on the beat, who will live amongst their local communities. On top of that, you'll have the rest of them are police support officers. Again, same thing, in your neighbourhood, in your communities. So the idea is to actually make police more visible. Yvette Keeper keeps saying too many people don't see a policeman or woman on the street from 1 week to the next.
Yeah.
The point what Labour are talking about is they're going to change that.
And it's that broken windows syndrome, isn't it? When, the sense of lawlessness, the sense that the streets simply are not police.
Yeah.
The sense that you can walk into your local shop and fill your rucksack with high-value items. That's what gets, things run down and people just committing crime with impunity.
Yeah, great. I want to move on to another topic now. It's caught my eye today, and that's a new report saying that the trans census data is, quote, totally unreliable. This is Michael Biggs, an associate professor at Oxford University, saying that people simply didn't understand the question, and therefore the actual number of people who say they're trans might be massively off.
Yes, and it could be. And there are no decent statistics on this. That the only one you've got are the number of people a year who get gender recognition certificates, which allows them to change their gender on official documents, birth certificates, passports, things like that. So if it's 250, there's 250 we know about. There are other estimates that say there are up to 500,000 people who are trans in this country. That seems hugely high. Somewhere along the line, there's this huge discrepancy and the figures are not being collected properly.
Emma?
I think it'd be really interesting to know, and I hope I don't offend anyone by saying this, I'd be really interested to know how many people are gay in this country, because I think I've seen, in my lifetime, I've seen many, many, many more people who are gay than previously. Lots of people can feel more able to come out now. But this trans thing, well, what is the obsession? What is our obsession? It's such a tiny minority of the entire population. We seem to have an obsession. It dominates the political agenda in a way that other such, kind of niche issues don't. Can't we agree that no matter who you love, how you dress, who you sleep with, how you feel, we respect you? Why do we have to obsess about
totally
people's sex lives, about people's genitals,
absolutely happy with
and
that.
about people mutilating their bodies in order to... Why can't we just accept people and respect them?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's no reason why we shouldn't. And you're also right that the trans issue seems to be something we debate, probably over-debate. What MPs tell me is it just doesn't come up on the doorstep. People are not that concerned about it. And it seems to be the chattering classes which I suppose we belong to, which are talking about this far more than the rest of the population. They care about the cost of living and things like that.
They do, but we also belong to the common sense class. And an astonishing fact that leaps out of this is the highest percentage of trans people, if you believe the census data in Britain, is in Newham and Brent. Do you know Newham and Brent?
I used to live in Brent.
So you know full well that it's not, I wouldn't think, it's a trans hotbed, but it is a hotbed of people whose first language isn't English. And this report says that people simply don't understand the question. So they're ticking a box to say they're trans when they haven't got a blooming clue what it means.
In which case, the question's got to be done differently. What we need to do is, the reason for collecting this data is to make policy. What you must have is the integrity of the figures. Therefore, this data is not being collected properly.
And there's a suggestion that the questions were sort of, were purposefully worded in a sort of slightly confusing way. Were you born into the body that is the same as the gender that you identify with? All of that kind of stuff, which, if English is not your first language, could be very confusing. These kind of double negative gender ideology questions.
And as you say, Emma Wolf, and yet this data, which by this reckoning is flawed, is setting all sorts of policy and political agenda. Emma Wolf, Nigel Nelson, thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure, and we'll see you again in the next hour. Still to come, a claim that violence between Muslim and white gangs is rife in UK prisons. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The odd shower towards the south today, but otherwise it's fine with sunny spells, especially much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've got an area of high pressure towards the northwest of the UK. However, we've still got this northerly breeze bringing cool conditions countrywide, and it's going to feel especially cool on the North Sea coast. Any showers in the south will disappear into the evening, but there'll be further showers into the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, and one or two developing across Wales and western England. Now, where we avoid the showers, where we get some clear spells, temperatures will fall away at such a frost first thing on Thursday. A chilly start, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, central England. However, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine first thing, and we keep the largely fine and sunny weather for western Scotland, northwest England, for example. Elsewhere, a bit more cloud compared with today, and a few more showers developing, particularly for parts of England and Wales, eastern Scotland. Still that cool breeze for the North Sea coast, 8 or 9 Celsius at best for some North Sea areas, but otherwise elsewhere into the double figures. Now, Friday starts off frosty, a chilly start in the east of England in particular, but otherwise a few showers and some sunny spells expected. More unsettled weather arrives from the south through the weekend.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:50. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, on to a behind-the-scenes look at the British prison system. And a former inmate has told of the turf wars between extreme Islamists and white supremacists. Chris Atkins has written a book in which he details the tactics that lags use, which include creating makeshift knives by sharpening toothbrushes and also throwing boiling water filled with sugar. He claims vulnerable young inmates are targeted for recruitment, with management unable to tackle this growing problem. Well, joining me now is Kevin Hurley, the former City of London police head of counter-terrorism. Welcome to the show, Kevin. Always a pleasure. How serious an issue do you think that is? We talk all the time about prisons at breaking point and of the inmates gaining control, to the point yesterday we heard there could be riots like Strangeways. How much of an issue is Islamist extremism within this system?
it's becoming very serious. And the prison service really can't do too much about it. They're very short-staffed. They don't actually have equipment. And basically, people will join these gangs for protection because the Islamist gangs hold sway in some of the most serious Category A prisons. So if you want to survive and avoid having boiling water with sugar in it designed to stick to your skin or end up getting stabbed with the equivalent of a knitting needle, you need to get some protection. And it's a big problem. Only maybe 2 prison officers on a wing with maybe 40, 50 prisoners. They can't really do much about it because most of the work of a prison officer is done by chatting, persuading, and so on. It's not about force and pushing people around. It's about really cajoling, chatting, persuading. They've got a big problem themselves, and I suspect it won't be long before there's potentially a prison officer is killed in one of these situations, because there have been some very serious assaults on them in the past.
And Kevin, we hear all the time that our jails are so full that we're letting cons out early. We're less likely to send them down in the first place. People leaving the prison service in numbers because, of course, of terrible working conditions, overcrowding. This is the perfect storm, isn't it, for this kind of extremism to take hold and a total inversion of the power dynamic.
Yeah, and we've mishandled it in the past, in that sometimes we thought the right thing to do was bring in some imams who would help to de-radicalise, and in fact some have been found in the past that actively call or actively encourage the extremist type behaviour. But it all comes down to they don't have the staff and they don't have the facilities to keep people separate. I would, wouldn't I? If I went to prison, it would be quite terrible for me as an ex-cop. But the thought of going into a Category A prison, where not only you've got what you might call your standard gangsters, but gangsters from all over the world, but these particular gangs ruling the roost, must be quite terrifying. And you'd have no option but to join another gang. Often, we follow the social trends in America. And of course, the prisons in America are run by extremist gangs of one form or another, whether they're white, skinhead type extremists, or at the other end, black street gangs, and increasingly now in places like Minneapolis, where there's a large Muslim population, you're now getting Islamist gangs developing within their their state penitentiary system.
OK, Kevin Hurley, thank you very much for joining us. A very concerning state of affairs. And indeed, Ian Aitchison conducted a 2016 review into extremism in British prisons. And Kevin, nothing really seems to have changed. The conclusion was Muslims have won the power battle between prison gangs, says the hero of the London Bridge attack, also Steve Gallant, who we spoke to previously. Kevin Hurley, thanks for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have your expert insight. Pupils are being released from a school in southwest Wales, which was placed in lockdown after 3 people were injured in a reported stabbing this morning. 1 person's been arrested. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News on Britain's News Channel. Here's your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The odd shower towards the south today, but otherwise it's fine with sunny spells, especially much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've got an area of high pressure towards the northwest of the UK. However, we've still got this northerly breeze bringing cool conditions countrywide, and it's going to feel especially cool on the North Sea coast. Any showers in the south will disappear into the evening, but there'll be further showers into the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, and 1 or 2 developing across Wales and western England. Now, where we avoid the showers, where we get some clear spells, temperatures will fall away at a frost first thing on Thursday. A chilly start, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, central England. However, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine first thing. And we keep the largely fine and sunny weather for western Scotland, northwest England, for example. Elsewhere, a bit more cloud compared with today, and a few more showers developing, particularly for parts of England and Wales, eastern Scotland. Still that cool breeze for the North Sea coast, 8 or 9 Celsius at best for some North Sea areas, but otherwise elsewhere into the double figures. Now, Friday starts off frosty, a chilly start in the east of England in particular, but otherwise a few showers and some sunny spells expected. More unsettled weather arrives from the south through the weekend.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The southbound A1M still closed off from Boroughbridge to Allerton Park. That's junction 48 to 47 for investigation work. Big queues on the approaches tailing back to Thirsk at 49. Traffic slow in Boroughbridge Ripon as well, and the A61 towards Ripley's queuing. Northbound M61 after Chorley at 8's queuing as well. A lane shut and obstruction causing queues. Northbound M6 from 24 up to Bryn 25's queuing. A lane shut at the scene of a collision. On the southbound side of the M6 around Sandbach and Crewe at junction 17, there's a broken down lorry blocking the inside lane, and that's causing delays. And there's a breakdown in Berkshire affecting the westbound M4. Slow going, a lane shut Cheveley 13 to Hungerford at junction 14 this afternoon. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Breaking news in the last couple of minutes. And a teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following the stabbing at Amman Valley School in Wales. We'll bring you more details on that soon. And after weeks of the Metropolitan Police being accused of soft-soaping pro-Palestine protests, yesterday riot police and mounted cops steamed into a St George's Day parade. It is final proof that we got two-tiered policing in Britain. And believe me, you will not want to miss out on this corker of a story. We'll meet the man who served in the Special Forces during the Second World War, who's been celebrating his 102nd birthday in style. Look at him, he looks younger than me. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Thanks for joining me on the show. Always a delight to have your company. I've been joined in the studio by Stephen Barrett. You know him as a regular on the show and expert on matters of the law. I'll be having a conversation with him about the two-tier policing situation in Britain. Have we got it? What's going on? Yesterday, undeniably, the police operated in a very, very different way than you will have seen on any of the pro-Palestine marches. I've been on both sets of those marches. I've seen it firsthand. It is very different, up close and personal. Why is this happening? What can be done about it? And let me know your opinions. As ever, send your views in by getting on to gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch and I'll read some comments out before the end of the show. But before all of that, it's time for your headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 5. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. And we start with some breaking news. A teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after 2 teachers and a teenage student were stabbed at a school in Wales. The suspect remains in custody. Pupils were released after 3 people were injured in that stabbing at Amman Valley School in South Wales. The school has been in lockdown since 11 a.m. Wales Air Ambulance provided 3 critical care teams, and parents gathered outside the school. They could be seen tearfully hugging their children as they emerged. 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl, while trying to cross the Channel yesterday. The National Crime Agency says they were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. Those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. It comes as figures from the Home Office show that more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. A man has been charged after a 9-year-old girl was kidnapped in Knightsbridge in central London. 56-year-old Robert Prosak was charged with multiple offences, including kidnap and sexual assault on a female under 13 years old. The child was reported missing on Brompton Road in London on Monday. Now, the Prime Minister insists his defence spending pledge is fully funded, though he declined to rule out cuts in other areas. The government has committed to reaching 2.5% of GDP by 2030 and is encouraging other members of the NATO alliance to match that amount. Speaking in Berlin, next to his German counterpart, Rishi Sunak said that rising conflicts around the world are making defence spending more urgent.
As a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognising the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defence spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defence spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies and the 2 largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends, as you said, for as long as it takes.
The Deputy PM says he's confident the government will keep its election manifesto promise to ban no-fault evictions. But there was some uncertainty at today's PMQs over when the long-promised ban might take effect. That's after Communities Secretary Michael Gove said it would be up to the House of Lords to decide the rate of progress. Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, says the government has made empty promises.
After 14 years, they failed renters, they failed leaseholders and they failed mortgage holders. But, Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
The head of TikTok says the social media app isn't going anywhere after President Biden signed a law that could see it banned in the United States. It's after growing concerns over the potential for the Chinese government to influence the app's algorithm and content. The new law would force its Chinese owner to sell the app or face a ban. The CEO of the app, which is used by 170 million Americans, says he expects to win a legal challenge. Staying in the US, and President Biden has signed a new aid package for Ukraine into law a short while ago. Today, it ends months of uncertainty over whether the US would continue supporting Kyiv, and comes after the bill passed the House of Representatives on Saturday in a show of bipartisan support. Ukraine's President Zelensky says it reinforces the US as a, quote, beacon of democracy. The government is set to face a High Court challenge against its XL bully ban. Campaign group Don't Ban Me, License Me has been given permission to bring legal action against the Department for Environment and Rural Affairs. The large bulldog-type American breed was added to a banned list in October last year following a series of attacks. Campaigners argue that the ban is unlawful and irrational. However, government lawyers say the challenge should be dismissed. Several military horses on the loose in central London this morning have now been contained. Video posted to social media appeared to show one of the animals covered in blood. At least 4 people were injured as they galloped their way through the busy city streets. Westminster Police says they'll now be transported for care. Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code that's on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Martin.
Thank you, Ray. And we start with this afternoon's breaking news. And a teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after 2 teachers and a teenage student were stabbed at Ammon Valley School in Wales. And let's cross now live to GB News' reporter Jack Carson, who is outside Ammon Valley School. Jack, a dramatic case. What's the latest?
Yeah, well, just in the last few moments, Martin, we've had that updated statement from the police, which said that just after 11:20 a.m. they were called to Ammon Valley School this morning after reports of an incident, and now we can confirm that a teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. The police confirming that 3 people were injured in this incident and taken to hospital, they say, with stab wounds, and the families of all of those members involved have been informed of the injuries, of course, that they've sustained. We know from a statement from the Welsh Ambulance Service that critical care was delivered here on site. There was air ambulances, there was a big emergency response immediately, and people around here in this area say this is a very unlikely event. When they saw those emergency services turned up, knew, of course, something serious was happening. The police said they're working with the school and agencies to ensure that the appropriate support is available to those students who may well have witnessed what has been described as well by some witnesses as horrifying as an incident. The police say this is a very distressing incident, and their thoughts are with the victims and their family and everybody impacted by what has happened. We understand that it is 2 teachers and a teenage pupil that have been taken to hospital with those stab wounds. And as I said, 1 teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Now, throughout the day, we've been hearing differing reports, but again, that confirmation from the police that it was 2 teachers and 1 student that have been stabbed. The forensic officers have been seen at the site of the school here. It's attached to a leisure centre. It's a busy part of this town here, but of course now completely closed off. The head girl, who wasn't actually here, was working from home today, said that she got a message from one of her friends that was studying for a psychology exam to say they'd received a message to say it was code red and the school was in lockdown. So it was a pretty instant response to when that incident was called to the police around 11:20 this morning. We are expecting a statement from Superintendent Ross Evans, who's the Carmarthenshire commander, shortly at around 5:30, and we'll bring you the latest once he's spoken here.
Thank you, Jack Carson, live outside Ammon Valley School. Shocking story of that school stabbing. A teenage girl now held on suspicion of attempted murder. Now let's talk about the events in central London yesterday and ask the question, do we have two-tier policing in the country? Well, GB News viewers can see footage on your screen now that was posted on social media by the Metropolitan Police yesterday afternoon. And the Met said at the time that officers were already dealing with disorder an hour before the St George's Day event was due to start. And they added that when they tried to get the group of people to turn around, they reacted by violently forcing their way through. Well, I'm joined in the studio by the barrister and writer Stephen Barrett. Stephen, welcome to the studio. It's a delight to have your company. We've been having this conversation now for many, many weeks, mainly since October the 7th. I've been on these protests. I've been on protests of both sides. I've seen up close and personal. And there is absolutely a feeling that the police get tooled up and are ready to go on one type of protest, and on the other they stand back and observe. Is that justified?
Well, I think we have to say yes now. And Baroness Fox said it earlier. She used the phrase differential treatment. I quite like that. If two-tier policing offends you, then use differential treatment. But there is something going on, because when we get violent and aggressive protests in a certain way, then the Metropolitan Police Commissioner will go on the television and be what I call performatively powerless. He will deny that he has any legal powers. He will look in his legal cupboard and he will find it bare, and he will pull a sad face and tell us, oh, well, I would do something if I could, but all of a sudden I can't. And yet when this protest happens, all the legal powers in the world were suddenly given to him. And I want your viewers to know, Martin, it's been ever since the Blair government, well, actually, Margaret Thatcher started giving them extra powers, that they've been handed powers like sweeties by every successive prime minister we've ever had. They have a massive bag. I mean, if this is like the world's biggest Halloween basket, they have just endless sweeties to use, and to turn around and pretend they don't have them is I mean, it's absurd. I mean, that's why I called them out and I wrote my article saying, giving the example of some of the powers that they have. I think we're reaching the point where we have to say that it's pushing at the boundaries of plausibility that they don't know about these powers, given that they suddenly find them when they find a group they don't like, and then they suddenly lose them when they find a group they do like. And how notable, I mean, just how notable that this all tracks along modern identity politics, and that certain groups who are clearly considered at the bottom of the pyramid in identity politics, i.e. white working class men, are more than, piled in on, but certain groups who are elevated in that that rather odd political structure get the benefit of it. And I think that isn't free, that isn't fair, that is not the rule of law.
Now, we've contacted the Metropolitan Police for comment throughout the day. They haven't got back to us yet, but of course they would deny these allegations strongly. They would say, and I've talked to them myself, I've implored them, Stephen, to arrest men at the pro-Palestine marches who were projecting those images onto Big Ben. They didn't want to do anything about that. I implored them to arrest men with full-face balaclavas on at those marches, and they definitely didn't want to get involved, and there were no signs of horses or riot shields. But then they would say that the people on St George's Day were looking for trouble. They would say that, wouldn't they? But I spoke with a bunch of them yesterday who said that wasn't the case. What are they meant to do? Are they in a bind?
No, they are meant to police us all in exactly the same way. They are supposed to be free and fair and impartial in the application of their powers, and they've lost impartiality because they focus instead on things called like community coherence and pleasing certain people. One of the great things I get to do in public life is I get to remain impartial because I don't mind who I upset. Now, that is a sort of license to upset everybody, so I'm not terribly lucky in that regard. But the minute you want to please people, the minute you want some people to like you, then you're not going to apply rules in a consistent way. And that's where the Metropolitan Police has gone. I always say that, it's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So, they see groups and they want to please them, and they want them to not feel punished. They want them not to feel victimised. They want them to feel that we are the good guys. And as a result, unfortunately, they're just not applying the law. And when you do that, things don't work.
And as opposed to the problem, they've they've had endless reports of their own where they've referred to themselves as institutionally, systemically racist. Are they wearing such a hair shirt of that burden that they're almost going out of their way now to prove they're the opposite thing?
Well, this is what happens, you see. They get people... We're all only human. So humans feel shame, and then they feel guilty, and then they want to make up for it. And in order to make up for it, they'll do almost anything. And clearly, the Metropolitan Police in particular have been very heavily shamed, quite rightly, but nonetheless, they have been quite heavily shamed in the past. And then they try and make up for it, and what we end up with is unequal policing. And I do question how much longer the British people will tolerate unequal policing, because it is so contra to everything that we believe. I mean, I had cause to read the Peelian Principles, and Robert Peel believed in equal policing, and the only reason we have a police force is to have equal policing. And I belong to one of these identity groups myself. I'm openly bisexual, so I don't want special treatment either. We all want equal treatment. That is what will work.
Yeah. Now the police, they maintain and they will repeat that there was a set route for the march given. They claim that the group went outside of the agreed limit when they blocked the limit. The St George's rally forced their way through. The police will say they were operating within the framework they gave out. That will be what they say. And they say the same thing on the pro-Palestine protest. There's an agreed route, and if you break it, they are entitled to enforce that. That's what they would say.
But they don't. You see, I don't... unfortunately for the Metropolitan Police, I don't have the memory of a goldfish. And we have seen the pro-Palestine marches go off the route. We saw an impromptu... what was it? Al-Quds demonstration. We've seen the most outrageous of behaviour completely ignored. We saw an order put in place that face coverings could not be worn, and then face coverings worn, and nothing done by officers on it. So I'm afraid, and I do think this is the poison of our age, that we live with this argument where it is two-stage, Martin. The first thing the authorities say is it's not happening. And then without missing a beat, once you catch them out, they turn around and go, oh, well, anyway, it's a good thing. And actually, what we need to go back to is when they do that, we need to turn around and go old-fashioned and say, well, hang on a second, your first statement was a lie. And actually, that's not right. And I want to live in a truthful society based on the rule of law. I don't like this sort of shallow... It's very narcissistic, it's very vain. The Metropolitan Police care much more about how they're coming across than they do seem to care about solving crime. And that's not helpful for what we're all trying to achieve.
OK, Stephen Barrett, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your expert insight as ever. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, it's the final week to see how your next holiday could be on us here at GB News, with your chance to win a Greek cruise for two, £10,000 in cash and luxury travel gifts. It's a prize worth over £20,000 and it could be yours. Don't miss out. And here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now there's a new line on Rishi Sunak's planned deportation flights to Rwanda. Apparently Ryanair is now offering to fly migrants to Kigali. More on that soon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
J.K. Rowling has accused politicians of snuggling up to trans campaigners. The Harry Potter author has called for an investigation into why political parties are embracing the language of pro-trans groups. So is it time to ditch campaign groups such as those? Well, welcome again to my clashers, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza, also businessman and activist Adam Brooks.
I think the Cass report is really welcome. I think there's been a huge amount of agreement, including from some
trans rights campaigners that there's an awful lot of good in the Cass report. I think that I'm more concerned about mermaids, which is currently under a Charity Commission investigation, and some of the reports, if they're to be believed, like sending out chest binders, are more alarming. I think on Stonewall, which has done such great work over the past 30 years on LGBT rights.
It said 2-year-olds could be trans. Now, that is one of the most horrifying things I read today. Actually, J.K. Rowling tweeted that out there. To say that a 2-year-old can think that they can be another gender when my 4-year-old still thinks she's Elsa on some days. You know, there's no common sense, and to me it's
very badly phrased.
It's very sinister that these people actually believe that these kids want to change gender, and unfortunately out there are parents that almost see a trans kid as a fashion accessory now, and I think this whole agenda has pushed on people that this is normal to change gender, and we have to push back. And as I said earlier, to be trans is not normal.
Well, I don't agree with that
extreme.
phrasing. I think it's extreme. It's a big step, Adam, but there are clearly people throughout history who have been
But it's
trans.
not normal behaviour, is it?
I think as far as children are concerned, children need to be given the space to explore the world, and that can include experimenting with, breaking previous gender stereotypes. That doesn't mean that people should be sort of labelled at the age of 2, which I completely disagree with.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:23. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, a development on the Rwanda bill, which passed through Parliament, if you recall, earlier in the week, because Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary has stepped in and offered to help the government with some of those flights. An astonishing development, and I'm joined in our studio by our political editor, Christopher Hope, to discuss this. Chris, we've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks, months and months, no commercial airline wants a reputational risk. The RAF won't even get involved. Even the airfields themselves are too afraid to put themselves forward because of the protests. And now, is this just a stunt?
Well, the issue of reputational risk is one pushed out by the scheme's critics, but in truth, the government doesn't know no one wants to get involved yet. And in fact, Rishi Sunak said that an airline is standing ready, an airfield is standing ready. I think the Ryanair CEO, Michael O'Leary, been around, I've known him from way back in the early part of the century when I was covering business for the Telegraph. He said, yeah, we'd happily take them if we've got some space. In winter, they've got a huge Boeing fleet, Ryanair. Why can't we just, if we'll get some money from the government to use the spare capacity? He says if it was a winter schedule and we had spare aircraft sitting around, if the government were looking for additional deportation flights or any other flights, we would happily quote for the business. He's saying that because tomorrow the quoting starts when we expect the King to give legal assent, royal assent to this bill passed on Monday after much gnashing of teeth from the peers, they'll be open for bids for trying and do it. Here's Michael Leary saying there's some money to be made. I wonder whether this is the start of a turning point on this policy. We heard from Jenny Chapman, Baroness Chapman, saying that Labour could reverse its saying we're going to axe the scheme if 10,000 people take off. But yeah, it's interesting.
It is. It could be quite the lifeline. I don't think any of us saw that coming. I still feel like it's a bit of a curveball. I've been taken somewhat by surprise. But let's talk about Rishi Sunak's second day of his transcontinental attempt to woo our European allies. Yesterday it was Poland in Warsaw. Today, Berlin, Germany, a new alliance after yesterday's £75 billion rollout. Rishi Sunak, do you think he's starting to look like, well, he's starting to look pretty prime ministerial?
He's showing his election fangs, Martin. To go back to three working days, 1, 2, 3, assault on Labour. Started with getting the people who should be at work back into work, the government would say, and get them off benefits into work. That was Friday. Next working day, Monday, he set out his Rwanda plan with how to get the planes off the ground when they're cleared by the Lords. Yesterday, huge hike in Labour, in defence spending. Labour itself has been left reeling. We heard earlier, though, from Emily Thornberry. She's a shadow Attorney General.
Said several weeks ago that we wanted to move towards spending 2.5% on defence, and indeed when we were in power last, that was about the amount of money that we were spending. But we will do it as circumstances allow. We'll be looking with some interest at whether or not the government produces any details in relation to this, because, you know, the Prime Minister yesterday essentially committed to spending another £75 billion on defence by 2030. So they produced this 22-page document, and not a single line of it was on where the money was coming from. Now, hopefully it'll come in the near future, just like we're hoping that they're going to give us the details on the £46 billion that it's going to cost them to get rid of national insurance. They haven't given us any details on that either. I mean, as we get closer to an election, we're going to get more and more of this, you know, and I know that your programme will hold the government to account in the way that you hold us to account, and that if people want to say they want going to spend money, they need to tell us where the money is going to come from, because in the end it's the public that needs to pay for it.
Well, that was Emily Thornberry earlier, seeming a bit rattled, I think. Is this because 12 days ago, Chris, the Labour Party said that they would commit 2.5% to GDP. Now the Tories have done it first, and she's changed her tune.
They said when we can afford it. As the Tory government said back in 2022, 2 Prime Ministers ago with Boris Johnson, the position has been when we can afford it, we'll get to 2.5% by 2030. The difference is Rishi Sunak has found out how he thinks he can afford it by cutting civil service jobs. Labour can't do that. They'll save money on the civil service job cuts, the government says. Labour can't do it because they can't risk offending the public and commercial services union, which represent public service sector workers. And that's the problem. That's why I think there's a problem here for the Labour Party. They are going to have to sit with being weak on defence, going into an election campaign, and they'll only firm those plans up after the election if they win power with a big strategy document. So I think the Tories have had quite a good few days.
It does actually feel, for the first time perhaps in quite some time, Chris, that the Labour Party are having to be the ones responding to what the Conservatives are doing. As you keep saying, Rishi Sunak seems to be in the fetal position, taking quite a battering, West Streeting, taking a lead on the privatisation of the NHS. This looks like maybe they're getting on a front foot left.
Yeah, and he needs to. It's self-preservation. He's got a difficult week next week, the back end of it, with the local elections, the mayoral elections in some of our biggest cities. The Tories are trailing way behind in the polls. He's come out fighting, probably just in time. He wants to lead this party into the next election, and the past few days have shown me how he'll do it.
Do you think it will work? Because elections aren't won and lost on defence policy, on foreign policy. It's the pounds and the pence in the pocket, and it's on things like immigration. Could Ryanair be the curveball none of us saw coming?
Well, it could be, if they can. I think that foreign affairs definitely is not an election winner, really, although it can damage the government, as it did with the Iraq war in 2005 and the Labour administration. But I think it's keeping us safe, and that's what the Tories can almost try and say, we'll guarantee it. Labour can't guarantee it, and that is called an election dividing line.
I wonder if it would be enough. When will the next poll be out, do you think? When can we expect to see a poll that will reflect all this? Because they're desperate for an uptick.
The weekend, probably. I mean, whether anyone outside of our really informed viewers on GB News, or enough of them are watching it, I mean, it takes a while for this stuff to sink through. But they should really be driving home this message that we will keep you safe. Labour can't say that yet because they're not going to say how they're going to get to 2.5% of spending on GDP.
Superb stuff. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Chris Hope, our political editor. I'm still reeling about the Ryanair thing. Maybe that's just me. Look, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and we're expecting an update from the school in Wales where a teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after 2 teachers and a teenage pupil were stabbed there earlier today. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. It's 5:30, and as we've been hearing, a teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after 2 teachers and a teenage student were stabbed at a school in Wales. The suspect remains in custody. A Man Valley school was put into lockdown shortly after 11 a.m. after 3 people were injured. Emergency services responded, including Wales Air Ambulance. Pupils have now been released to their worried parents, who were gathered outside of the school gates. 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl, as they attempted to cross the Channel yesterday. Those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. It comes as figures from the Home Office show that more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. A man has been charged after a 9-year-old girl was kidnapped in Knightsbridge in central London. 56-year-old Robert Prusak was charged with multiple offences, including kidnap and sexual assault. The child was reported missing on Brompton Road in London on Monday. The Deputy Prime Minister says he's confident the government will keep its promise to reform housing laws, including banning no-fault evictions and leaseholds. But there was some uncertainty at today's PMQs over the effectiveness of the reforms. Labour's deputy leader said the leasehold ban wouldn't apply to the majority of people, with ground rents now capped instead of being cut altogether. Angela Rayner said the government had made empty promises. The head of TikTok says the social media app isn't going anywhere after President Biden signed a law that could see it banned in the US. It's after growing concerns over the potential for the Chinese government to influence its algorithm and content. The new law would force TikTok's Chinese owner to sell or face a ban. For the latest news headlines, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
OK, let's show you the money. The pound will buy you $1.2432 and €1.1632. Price of gold, £1,869.30. That's per ounce. And the FTSE 100's closed the day at 8,040 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Now, there's a new way for you to get in touch with me. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your-say. And loads of you have been in touch. Let's go through a few now. Now, we talked about 2-tier policing after St George's Day yesterday. Kevin has said this: it's out of order to live in a country that condemns those that show pride and support for their country, making you a target for rough, robust policing. My question is this: are the British police now anti-British? Jade has this: there's an undercurrent at every pro-Hamas march, yet nothing is ever done. It's 2-tier policing, and most people know that. Well, somebody who isn't afraid to talk about that, in fact, she monstered it last night, is Michelle Dewberry, who joins me now, of course, Jubes & Co, 6 till 7. Michelle, always a pleasure. What's on your menu tonight?
Hello, Martin. Well, yeah, of course, you know, you imagine if your kids, your grandkids are at school, and then you get that call to say that that school is in lockdown. I mean, it must be absolutely terrifying. So I want to look at what on earth is going on when it comes to young people and some of their behaviour. We hear about things like stabbings and knife crimes all the time, but what is the answer to it all then? Anyone out there? Have you got a simple answer? If you do, could you tell me it, please? Because I'm at a loss as to how on earth we fix all this. But I also want to ask, there's been a committee taking place today looking at arms sales over to Israel. Should this still be happening? Should it be paused? Fascinated to hear everybody's views on that. What I can tell you now, my panel completely disagree. I also want to ask as well whether or not council should essentially, Martin, be selling the family silver to help clear up their debts. And if I've got time, I want to squeeze it in. Should serving politicians be presenting shows on radio and television? Do you think they should?
Well, it's obviously a topic close to our home. I think, well, why not? So long as they don't present news, those are the regulations. And Michelle, about that school in Wales, can you imagine picking your kid up at home time as normal with them having go through what they've been through today? Michelle, I don't think I'd ever let my kid go.
But you know what I find interesting? And obviously I don't condone breaking of the rules, but if I got a call to say that my child was at school, nursery, wherever, and there was an incident and there was in lockdown, I would be straight at those doors and I'd be doing everything that I possibly could to get in and get my child out of there. It must be absolutely terrifying.
OK, that's all coming up. Jubes & Co, 6 till 7. Michelle Dewberry, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Now, a man who served in the Special Forces during the Second World War has celebrated his 102nd birthday in style at a 5-star hotel in London. And he invited GB News along to share his special day. It's a wonderful story. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. The A1M in North Yorkshire remains shut southbound from junction 48 to 47 between the Borough Bridge and Allerton Park exits. Investigation works underway following an accident. Long queues back to Thirsk on the A19 towards York and on the A61 towards Ripley as you divert. On the M6 in Greater Manchester, one lane shut northbound towards Bryn, junction 25 at the scene of an accident. And on the M5 in Worcestershire, the outside lanes closed northbound just after 4, the Bromsgrove turnoff for emergency repairs, queuing back to the M42. And in Southwest London, Upper Richmond Road, East Sheen closed for accident investigation work. Queues heading west towards Bristol on the M4. 2 lanes are closed just before the M32 exit where a vehicle's caught fire. And the M4 is partly blocked eastbound from junction 36 to 35 away from Bridge End following an accident. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
So J. Cole, who is a rapper, says he felt terrible after releasing a song aimed at fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar and vowed to pull the track off streaming services. He said, "I ain't gonna lie to y'all. The past 2 days felt terrible," he told an audience at the Dreamville Festival in North Carolina. "I damn near had a relapse," he said.
There's a lot of young people, especially, you know, that would look at that and they will take it not just as entertainment.
It doesn't happen in any other form of art that I can think of. This is not happening in country music, is it?
Well, it's the same problem in both cases, isn't it? Who's doing the regulating? And surely it's each case on its merits, isn't it? You don't just ban a genre.
Why is there such a lot of hatred for a man who usually would have trash-talked back to stand up and say, you know, this doesn't sit well with me and I love this guy? If we look at, I think his name was Cody Fisher, the semi-professional footballer who died in a club because someone stabbed him. Now, he was stabbed because he stepped on someone's trainers. This is the level of ego we're seeing from a lot of young men who don't have any output of being able to channel that energy, and a lot of it is stemming from cultures like football, hip-hop, these sorts of things. So I'm just saying it's refreshing to see a man who could have easily wiped the floor with his lyrics say, I don't have to, you know?
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I took this interview in the wrong direction. It's not about pointing out the areas of concern. Actually, this story is saying, look, music and art can be giving you an example of how to live a slightly better life.
That's free speech. Saying, sorry, I'm sorry, I choose not to fight back because I love you. It may look like a wimpy thing to do, but it's still free speech.
You know what? I love you, Paul. Sorry about earlier.
Welcome back. It's 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the last surviving member of a Special Forces regiment during World War II has fulfilled his lifelong dream to dine at the Ritz Hotel in London as he celebrated his 102nd birthday in style. Chelsea pensioner John Morris volunteered for the Raiding Support Regiment and took part in the Allied invasion of Italy. And Cameron Walker went along to meet him.
War is not glamorous. We thought it was, actually, when you're young.
John Morris is the last surviving member of his SAS regiment from the Second World War. Before joining the Special Forces, his service began in Kent, shooting down German bombers targeting London.
The only thing I shot down, actually, was a chimney, kitchen chimney, accidentally by mistake. Nobody had any breakfast that morning. I wasn't very popular.
John was one of the last people to receive a 100th birthday card from Queen Elizabeth II.
All birthday cards from the children from Christchurch School.
Celebrating his 102nd birthday this week, local school children made him cards, thanking him for his bravery.
I think kids should know more about the sacrifice their forefathers made. Not me, I'm no hero, but all the RAF boys had died, and people like that, they don't realise that. They don't know much about it. They don't even know who Hitler was, half of them.
John, who's now a Chelsea pensioner, kindly agreed to share his wartime memories. In 1943, he was sent to North Africa with the Royal Artillery and passed Special Forces selection, taking part in the Allied invasion of Italy.
75,000 British and colonial troops were killed in Italy. The Germans fought back very well.
Ultimately, the Allies were successful, but a much more powerful, natural threat was not far away. Mount Vesuvius, famous for destroying the Roman town of Pompeii in AD 79, erupted.
I woke up in the morning, heard this rumble, looked outside, and this wall of lava coming down. So never go on a volcanic island where I am, because it's very dangerous.
That year, Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy. Known as D-Day, the operation led to the liberation of Western Europe and was one of the most famous and widely praised successes of the war. Far away in Italy, John and his comrades were branded with a less than flattering nickname, turned into a popular wartime song.
We've already done 3 D-Days. We did the North African landing, we did the Battle of Britain, and we did the Italian landing, we did the Yugoslavia, Albania, and they called us D-Day Dodgers.
But we're the D-Day Dodgers out in Italy.
John celebrated his 102nd in style. First a party with the Chelsea pensioners, followed by a champagne lunch organised by friend and Irish Guards ambassador Frederike Crum.
The Ritz always had a wonderful relationship with the Chelsea pensioners. We celebrate in style, and he's never been to the Ritz, so that will be worthy of the 102nd birthday. Right, John?
That's right.
Cameron Walker, GB News.
Fantastic stuff, and happy birthday, John Morris, the very best of British. Now, I'm going to talk to you about deep fakes and why they could play a crucial role in the next general election. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The odd shower towards the south today, but otherwise it's fine with sunny spells, especially much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've got an area of high pressure towards the northwest of the UK. However, We've still got this northerly breeze bringing cool conditions countrywide, and it's going to feel especially cool on the North Sea coast. Any showers in the south will disappear into the evening, but there'll be further showers into the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, and 1 or 2 developing across Wales and western England. Now, where we avoid the showers, where we get some clear spells, temperatures will fall away. It's such a frost first thing on Thursday. A chilly start, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, central England. However, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine first thing. And we keep the largely fine and sunny weather for western Scotland, northwest England, for example. Elsewhere, a bit more cloud compared with today, and a few more showers developing, particularly for parts of England and Wales, eastern Scotland. Still that cool breeze for the North Sea coast, 8 or 9 Celsius at best for some North Sea areas, but otherwise elsewhere into the double figures. Now, Friday starts off frosty, a chilly start in the east of England in particular, but otherwise a few showers and some sunny spells expected. More unsettled weather arrives from the south through the weekend.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria DiPiero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. 5:46. We're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, could deep fakes play a crucial role in the next general election? Well, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer have already been victims of deep fakes, but what are they and how dangerous could they be? Well, joining me now in the studio is the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn, and I'm rejoined by GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson to find out how big a deal this could be. Andrew, let's start with you. So, in a nutshell, what are deep fakes and why should we be concerned? And who's been probed?
Oh, I'll tell you what, everybody should be terrified about deep fakes, because basically I can make you do, say, dance, whatever I want you to do, all as a result of artificial intelligence. And what's happening is that 2 billion people are going to the polls this year, and at the same time, AI is going to have the biggest influence on elections ever. And you might remember we had good old Rishi. He was pulling a pint, and they did that fake pint. They made it look as though he wasn't pulling it properly. I put up a couple of images there. Yeah. The one on the left, it makes it look really dodgy. You look at the girl's eyes, and she's sort of saying, well, hang about, what on earth are you doing?
So the one on the left is the fake.
The one on the left is the fake.
Because it makes him like an incompetent pint puller, which of course would decimate his votes. It would in my eyes anyway.
And the one on the right is the original. So all of these things, I always say, question everything. It's a diseased information age, and you have to work on that sort of basis, especially AI will influence basically what's going to happen.
And it's been rolled out in other countries too. Absolutely. Tell us about some others.
So Slovakia, basically the elections there might have been the first swung by deepfakes. A pro-Kremlin populist won in power there. And what happened days before the election, a video emerged, and an audio as well, with him sort of saying how he's going to rig the election. And all the people suddenly say, well, hang on, if he's going to rig the election, we're going to vote against him. So he lost. They had that in different things in Indonesia. They had an avatar of a previous person endorsing one of the candidates, and they have all these audio recordings as well. So fake audios are going all over the place at the moment, and we've had a few in this country as well.
So tell us about a case you mentioned of a politician speaking in a foreign language. language, obviously designed to try and appeal to people of that ethnic persuasion. But it was a fake. Who was it?
So there are a number of people. So it was basically in India. They had that with the different elections there, and the member of the party was turning around and he spoke in all the different dialects, and people were incredibly impressed that he could do that because he could appeal to that. But also in New York, the mayor there was basically phoning lots of people up, and he was speaking Mandarin, he was speaking French, and all the different peoples, whatever language they wanted on that sort of basis. And he openly admitted, well, of course I'm using this, I'm trying to appeal to the people, so I'm using technology to do that.
Well, it sounds like a very 21st century, a persuasive way to get votes. And I believe, Andrew, you've actually made yourself into several multilingual political genii. Why don't we start with you, Andrew, as an Englishman, which of course you are.
Hello, I'm Andrew Eborn. We're living in a diseased information age. There's never been a more important time to question everything. So join me, Andrew Eborn, for Andrew Eborn's Fake or Fact.
So that's the genuine Andrew. Now here is the Italian Andrew Eborn.
Salve, sono Andrew Eborn. Viviamo in un'era malata dell'informazione. Non c'è mai stato un momento più importante per mettere in discussione tutto. Unitevi a me, Andrew Eborn, per il programma di Andrew Eborn, Fake or Fact.
I'm going to say, mamma mia, I'm convinced. But that's not all. We're just getting warmed up. Let's look at the Chinese Andrew Eborn.
大家好，我是安德鲁·艾伯恩。我们生活在一个病态的信息时代，现在是质疑一切的最重要时刻。质疑一切的重要时刻。假如我把安德鲁·伊伯恩参加安德鲁·伊伯恩的虚假还是？
Now, on the one hand, we're having a laugh.
Yes.
It's a very fun thing. But Nigel Nelson, I want to bring you in because this will start to be increasingly deployed, both in ways to appeal by pretending to be multilingual, but also in ways to attack. We've already seen attacks on Labour MPs and indeed on Rishi Sunak. Matt Hancock had the worst pint on the planet. Rishi Sunak followed. People do believe these things, don't they? And that could be a problem.
That's the danger. And I think that what we've just seen there is great fun.
Yes.
That's fine. The real problem is what happens when the Russians start doing it. So Russian foreign policy since the Cold War has been to destabilise the West by planting fake news, disinformation. This takes it to a whole new level. What they used to do was so-called auto-generated bikini bots. So it was stolen pictures of scantily clad young women pumping out messages every 10 minutes. Used in 2016 for Donald Trump's election, they kept repeating his tweets, so amplifying everything that happened, but also they can plant conspiracy theories, COVID conspiracy theories as an example. They can divide people by pretending to be on different sides, and so it goes on. This takes it even further and is much more serious because it's much more believable.
And Andrew, has this actually provably affected elections already?
Oh, absolutely. I gave those examples. In Argentina, it worked on that sort of basis. In Slovakia, it's worked on that sort of basis. And what's interesting, I did one take on that just this afternoon, and it's a really brilliant software from Lazar Vukovic and Dmitry Kipkalo. And what they've done, you can basically dub into several languages automatically. So you imagine how powerful that is, and things only can get better and better on that sort of basis. So it will happen. I always say question everything. We're living in a diseased information age where if it's too good to be true, it definitely is.
And Nigel, we've already seen, Chinese interference. TikTok is being talked about today as a way of affecting British politics. As you said, the Russians, so exterior hostile actors could also compromise this sort of technology.
Yeah, that's where it becomes really dangerous. At the moment, if political parties wanted to use it, the answer is they should say so. Some news websites in this country use it, but they actually tell you they're using AI to generate some content. The big danger is if a hostile power wants to use this stuff, we just won't know where it's coming from.
Andrew, should we be concerned, or would it be obvious to spot?
No, it won't be obvious to spot at all, and it's got better and better. The audio fakes, this is why you fool everybody, because we're living, as I say, in an age when fact is stranger than fiction. You get all sorts of videos released, all sorts of scandals coming out. Most of those will be false now, and I guarantee we're going to get far more of these fake videos. Every single day I'm seeing more and more of them.
Superb. Thank you very much, Andrew Eborn and Nigel Nelson. The concept of deep fakes, how concerned should we be? Now, earlier in the show, we spoke about an incident yesterday afternoon when the Metropolitan Police officers clashed with people who were at a St George's Day march, where in the last few minutes, the Metropolitan Police has told us that police officers did not close down any pubs. They told us that they engaged with licensed premises in the Westminster area, as is common as part of such an event, and one pub chose to close voluntarily. I was in the area, that's not quite what I saw, but look, the police have just repeating that there was a voluntary closure on St George's Day. There had been a number of arrests at a pub further up towards Trafalgar Square, and so a voluntary, they are saying, the last few minutes, the Met have told us that they did not close down any pubs. They engaged with licensed premises in the Westminster area, as is common, and one pub chose to close voluntarily. Well, that's it from me, but Jubes & Co is up next. Don't forget, from breakfast at 6 a.m, it's Stephen and Ellie, and then it's Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev, and then Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. I'll be back at 3 o'clock. That'll be my mush on your screens there, and I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. But now it's time for your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The odd shower towards the south today, but otherwise it's fine with sunny spells, especially much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've got an area of high pressure towards the northwest of the UK. However, we've still got this northerly breeze bringing cool conditions countrywide, and it's going to feel especially cool on the North Sea coast. Any showers in the south will disappear into the evening, but there'll be further showers into the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, and one or two developing across Wales and western England. Now, where we avoid the showers, where we get some clear spells, temperatures will fall away at such a frost first thing on Thursday. A chilly start, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, central England. However, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine first thing, and we keep the largely fine and sunny weather for western Scotland, northwest England, for example. Elsewhere, a bit more cloud compared with today, and a few more showers developing, particularly for parts of England and Wales, eastern Scotland. Still that cool breeze for the North Sea coast, 8 or 9 Celsius at best for some North Sea areas, but otherwise elsewhere into the double figures. Now, Friday starts off frosty, a chilly start in the east of England in particular, but otherwise a few showers and some sunny spells expected. More unsettled weather arrives from the south through the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with the latest. In North Lanarkshire, the M80 has a lane out northbound from junction 5 to 6 near Cumbernauld. That's past the scene of an accident of queues all the way back to the M73. In North Yorkshire, the A1M remains shut southbound junction 48 to 47 between the Borough Bridge and Allerton Park exits just south of the A59 for accident investigation work. Long queues back to Thirsk and on the A61 and the A19 avoiding. On the M62 in Greater Manchester, 2 lanes are shut westbound from junction 12 to 11, heading away from the M60 past the scene of a breakdown. The M4 remains closed westbound, junction 18 to 19 between Bath and Bristol after a lorry caught fire, causing long queues. And on the M1 in Hertfordshire, a lane shut southbound, junction 9 to 8 towards Hemel Hempstead at the scene of a breakdown, causing long queues towards Luton. That's the latest.